Lord of the Mysteries, A Time Traveler in the Fourth Age by author Kai Yunji Chapter 381-402. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And those who want to support me, I have a Patreon channel, get early access to video on Patreon. Hidden Sage Sophia. Sauron aimed, locked on, and the purple flames harvested with precision. The shadow tree bleeds, its roots are severed, but it still doesn't want to give up. Inside the Trier Mirror world, there exists something more moving to the tree than life itself. You're getting cocky. Sauron frowned slightly. He was only concerned about the pollution caused by the shadow tree, and did not want to get dirty, but that was by no means a reason for this thing to dare to ignore it. A flash of blood-red light, and the entire shadow tree was torn apart, turning into a puddle of illusory, black, viscous sludge of desire, returning to a patch of desire abyss in the collective unconscious sea of the Trier region. It's not that Sauron doesn't want to deal with this tree, but it's truly troublesome. It's not a real entity, its roots, or rather, its seed, are deeply buried in the depravity of people's hearts. Sauron can't keep chasing after it and getting stuck in the quagmire. Even if Archangel had been exposed to too much of the darkness in people's hearts, it would only deepen his madness. Although the shadow tree was cut down, it did put up a fight before disappearing. Its roots successfully penetrated into the Trier Mirror world, leaving behind several branches and quickly using its own characteristics to escape and hide deeper into the mirror world. Depend on. Sauron cursed, wanting to pretend he hadn't seen it, simply repair the seal rift, and leave. However, the Trier Mirror world is special after all. If the branch of the shadow tree really causes a big commotion inside, the Trier on the ground may be blown into the sky, and the Sauron family living in the Trier Palace will also be affected to some extent. This woman is a little too responsible, especially when it comes to her family. Don't let me catch you, or I'll use your tree bark to polish my shoes. Even as he grumbled, Sauron still threw out a few stones, dripping his blood onto them and letting them pass through the crack in the seal. After entering the Trier's mirror world, these stones transformed into soldiers capable of independent action, manipulated by Sauron's consciousness. Even without personally entering, Hunter Pathways Sequence 1 allows one to create a pseudo-angelic force that can be manipulated for a short period of time through preparation. The shadow tree's branches were seriously trying to escape, and the stone soldiers were seriously chasing them. A hunt was about to begin, and the final result was inevitable. None of the branches could escape, and they couldn't shake off a top-tier hunter, even if their will to survive exploded and they actively hid in all kinds of dangerous places. Trier, a luxurious mansion. Sha'ur knew Sauron had fallen into his trap. He regretfully raised his glass in a distant salute. Although he didn't really want to trick Sauron, fate was just so cruel. If Sauron wasn't diverted, Rosal's path to becoming emperor would have ended from the very beginning. It's time to try out the effects of command spells. With a thought, a pair of cold, illusory eyes appeared in the void before him. Hidden Sage glanced at Jacob in front of him and suddenly found himself unable to look away. This Jacob seemed different from the Jacobs in the Hermit of Fate who prayed to him and used him to complete mysterious rituals. You seem to be missing a sentence. So, are you my master? Sha'ur didn't make things difficult for the information life form to speak, since speaking is a form of communication between lower beings. In the name of command spell, manifest your virtual human form. Sha'ur raised his arm, and a command spell appeared on it, its duration dimming. A spiritual power, like a curse, appeared in his illusory eyes, and the forced contract began to take effect. These projection-like eyes began to change like a slideshow, revealing a virtual girl composed of data streams and starlight. She looked only 13 or 14 years old, with snow-white hair and a wide, classical robe that shimmered with faint starlight. Her small hands were clasped together, and the slight trembling of her fingertips seemed to be manipulating flowing data. Her eyes were light purple, and her pupils always remained in the same focus. He had an oval face, devoid of any extraneous expression, and an air of solemnity beyond his years. He looked somewhat dull, and his eyes were not very lively. Only when he glanced at data would a faint glimmer of logic flash across his face. Owner. She nodded, as if confirming something, and a golden cane inlaid with purple gemstones appeared between her clasped hands. The cane was very long, almost 2/3 of her height. She gripped the tip of the cane, seemingly pausing for a moment, but quickly resumed her movements, raising the cane slightly. A slight ripple appeared on her expressionless face, her brows furrowing almost imperceptibly, but as the purple gem shimmered, the fleeting resistance was overwhelmed by reason. This is Hermit, the embodiment of uniqueness. Shah placed his hand on Hidden Sage's raised cane, lightly tapping his fingertips as he stole in a step-by-step manner. By first stealing lower-level abilities and then gradually stacking up the ranks, he could more easily steal higher-level authority, thus gaining partial control over Hidden Hermit. He flicked the beautiful amethyst with his finger, and the stardust inside the crystal began to swirl and become chaotic. The girl's light purple eyes also showed a moment of blankness. An invisible star door was constructed, and Huang Dao, this name, this identity, became flowing data, like a grain of stardust, flying into the star door in the amethyst. Then the star door dissipated, the crystal returned to calm, and Hidden Sage breathed slightly, a thin layer of sweat appearing on his neck. It was the flowing data that couldn't be absorbed in time, and it also carried some uncontrollable power, bringing an uncomfortable, sticky feeling. These can be given to me. Shah loosened his grip on the scepter and looked at Hidden Sage, who was hanging his head and seemed to be under considerable pressure. After all, he had used Hermit. Uniqueness and Western continent. The connection between knowledge more, the reverse pollution, sent a package, and it is inevitable that Hidden Sage will be eroded and influenced by Saphira. He made one last steal, taking back the contamination of knowledge more and returning the stolen authority of Hidden Sage. He planned to later add this contamination to the sealed artifact of Knowledge Emperor that Rosal would eventually consume. The pressure on Hidden Sage lessened, and she shook her head lightly, her pure white hair swaying. She gripped the scepter again and looked at Shah, saying, "Master, Stefania defied your will and even tried to devour me." Hidden Sage, Hermit's successor whose real name is Sophia, begins to expose the misdeeds of her colleagues. He is the personified life of knowledge, although the personified part is not much. Stefania. Stiano. The protagonist of the era. Traditional naming idiots are really random. Shah found it quite interesting. Putting everything else aside, it's understandable that someone standing on the same side as Sun would have a self-centered ideology, even though the current god of craftsmen is just the weakest god who became a god by luck. Moreover, it's normal for god of craftsmen to have some rebellious thoughts. After all, he has become sequence 0. This is divinity, this is spirituality, this is humanity. It's okay, he can't catch you, and he can't beat you either. Shah crouched down slightly, looked at the cute little figure in front of her, gestured to indicate its height, and clearly liked the model very much. God of craftsmen, this is just a god, even the ritual of becoming a god is. Sequence 1 characteristics are not digested at all. The weak sequence 0 inches want to eat the king of kings angel in front of him, is probably quite difficult, and god of craftsmen's thighs should already be covered with tally marks with command spells. I will even help him become a god. A mighty man descended from the heavens to help him become a god. This is what I owe to fate. Since those at the top have taken the place of fate, those at the bottom must compensate for that loss. Whether the god of craftsmen becomes a god is irrelevant, what matters most is that Rosal becomes the son of steam. Aren't you going to reclaim your authority? Hidden Sage found it somewhat difficult to understand, his light purple eyes shimmering. After processing the information, he felt that this might be a mysterious ritual for digesting the knowledge more. However, this ritual was too mysterious, and even the King of Kings angel, who possessed uniqueness, could hardly understand it. Compared to this, can tampering with uniqueness control a King of Kings angel? Shah indeed had no intention of reclaiming power. He was in a very good position in this era. The three great families of mystery, especially Thief Pathway, achieved everything can be used by me, and was only a little short of being able to sublimate to the point where he did not have to own everything. He was interested in Hidden Sage. He thought he would have to use all three command spells to give himself a chance to reclaim his authority and counter Hidden Sage, but Hidden Sage actually cooperated quite well. It's probably not possible. The mental imprint within uniqueness can be gradually erased. But I will not disobey my master's will, nor would my great mother want me to do so. Hidden Sage made her own judgment, and she really didn't want to fight Shah. Her reason told her not to do something so foolish. Oh, it's not just simple activation, it also utilizes the power of the mother nest. Shah understood, he was quite cautious. Although such caution seems somewhat unnecessary now. When I return these contaminants to you, you can then separate a copy of the Sequence 1 property. Oh, remember to make it a sealed artifact before throwing the contaminant in, that will make it look more realistic. Shah gave a simple instruction, but Hidden Sage didn't understand. He nodded repeatedly, but still couldn't grasp it. So he continued to use computing power to integrate information and think. He had already confirmed that the Hidden Sage in front of him was 2 + 1, otherwise he wouldn't have said that the God of Craftsmen might not be able to defeat the Hidden Sage. As for Hidden Sage complaining, perhaps God of Craftsmen couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Hidden Sage is still very sensitive to malice, and she doesn't care whether it's a physiological instinct or not. When faced with someone who shows malice appetite or hostility appetite towards her, distancing herself and being wary is almost a no-brainer. As for Lao Huang, the reason for throwing some knowledge more pollution is to prevent Lao Huang from dying on the moon. Even if Lao Huang is about to die, even if the pollution is useless, at least it can be used as a buffer to give Sha'ur a point of entry to save him. And, in the unlikely event that Mother Goddess of Depravity could accurately trace the origins of the Mother Nest's aura or spirituality from within Old Huang's knowledge Emperor, Old Huang's chances of survival would be much greater. Although the Mother Goddess values life and is not bloodthirsty, a sequence one that has been obtained. How on earth did this thing manage to survive and get down from moon? Could it be that they didn't land on the moon, but instead found a place to pollute it? Sha'ur has been working tirelessly to help Lao Huang level up. He also wants to design several more promising routes for Lao Huang, providing more options for jumping the pathway. With more choices and greater risks, people will be more willing to actually jump into Black Emperor's trap. It's still early, and Rosal is still young. Sha'ur looked towards the southern continent. Nobody says there can only be one protagonist in an era. Southern continent. The Violet Sea, left behind by death before its fall, still blocks the sea routes between the north and south continents. There are no safe routes in between. Even half of the outer deity, before the death of Salinger, who was killed by Death and Red Priest, could not have left a safe route. The chaos in the Violent Sea is a regional phenomenon that combines the real world and the spirit world. This also led to the Balam Empire of the southern continent still barely surviving. In any case, the 7 true gods were severely injured and were recuperating in astral world while blocking the barrier. The countries of the North Continent had abandoned their industrial technology and were willing to repeat their civilization in order to cover up their history and maintain their legitimacy, so they did not launch a large-scale invasion of the Southern Continent for the time being. In the Southern Continent, some kingdoms, such as the Highlands Kingdom, have become independent again, but the Bound God has been abolished, and the Balam Empire has survived once more. Moreover, the Byron royal family possesses the Sequence 1 trait, and the Ascension ceremony is not that demanding. Even if it requires one's name to be linked to death and to be remembered and sung by most of the enlightened beings within a realm, it is only Sequence 1 and does not need to be sung by all the beings of the North and South continents. Those who cross the pathway haven't gone crazy, so what's wrong with a slightly less elaborate promotion ceremony? Aren't the songs sung by most creatures of the Southern Continent enough? It's not that harsh. There was nothing wrong with the logic. The High Priest of the Church of Death, Sequence 2 Death Consul Heidel, thought he could do it too, so he bravely gave it a try. Then he encountered something terrible and was severely corrupted. Not only was it difficult for him to leave his tomb, but in the subsequent orders to the outside world, he also began to prepare to awaken death. The angels of the Byron royal family and the Eggers family, seeing Heidel's miserable state, did not think that they, with the blood of death flowing through their veins, would perform better if they tried to advance. Perhaps they would perform even worse, not even able to save their own lives. High-sequence death pathways are not particularly afraid of death. Even if they die, they can be resurrected in the underworld or their own tomb. However, if they fail to ascend and their soul is dragged to the river of eternal darkness, that would be terrifying. No Aegis would have the face to go to the river Styx to meet their ancestors. Promotion without door, Violent Sea. The remaining divine power of death will eventually weaken, and the future is bleak. The other 3 emperors have all been wiped out. Will the Church of the 7 Gods show mercy to the Underworld Emperor's lineage? The Eggers family didn't believe it. So this ancient and knowledgeable family of gods set out on the southern continent, and death and wailing once again enveloped this seemingly cursed land. Greater than Sia Palenque Eggers. Eggers family has given up. Counting the days, it's absolutely impossible for the Violent Sea's death power to last another 1,000 years. Even 500 years would be a long shot. If you want to live a little longer in the death pathway, rather than being treated with respect when the time comes, you might as well prepare to be respectable yourself. If you can surrender, then surrender. If you can't surrender, then hide away, hide in the underworld, hide at sea. Anyway, death pathway starting with Sequence 5, you can utilize the underworld and use special rituals to sleep in underground tombs for 10 years without any problem. The only hope for the future is to find a way to survive and hide. Rather than suffer later, it's better to enjoy it first. The death family does not share this consensus, but with instability from top to bottom, death becomes easy to spread, life becomes cheap, and the overall atmosphere begins to repeat what every last dynasty inevitably goes through. Death pathway isn't without desires, even in Sequence 2 Son of Death, Death Consul. Mr. Ajik is so loving. Sha'ur also picked up a girl from Error, because of this. She was the product of a lavish affair by a branch of the Balam royal family. Unlike the nobles of a certain dynasty, the Balam Empire did not play the lowly game of tying someone up in a basement, then untying their clothes and piercing their chest with a red-hot silver needle. They have a deeper understanding of death. It is precisely because they understand death that they respect it more. This makes them more pragmatic, rather than allowing desires to become distorted or to test taboos. Therefore, the girl's mother takes a very direct approach, which conforms to the primitive and violent aesthetics of death. When Shah found her, she was hiding in a corner, her small body curled up, her eyes filled with suppressed hatred and indifference. She hated the Bailong royal family, but she showed no sympathy for the others who died in this atmosphere. She is equally ruthless, which is why she has survived to this day and gained Shah's favor. She is a very good child. She has not betrayed her class. She can coldly watch the disaster unfold before her eyes. She still has her own hatred, but this shows that she has her own thoughts. She is truly a very good child. What's your name? Shah picked up the little girl with some affection and gently stroked her slightly cold skin. It seems he also inherited some beyond characteristics. His skin has the starting point of the death pathway, sequence 9. The characteristics of corpse collectors are such that, if not for this reason, how could they have survived? In the case of a sequence, the genetic traits passed down to offspring after mating are often beyond the control of the individual. But perhaps it's to prevent some parents from being stingy. Shah Eggers. Looking at Shah who was holding her, even though it was their first meeting, Shah knew that this was a man who could bring her death. No, you should say, Sia Palenque Eggers. Don't forget your mother's surname. Although it may seem ordinary now, it will accompany you and become a symbol of nobility as you grow up. Or would you like it to become prestigious right now? Shah beckoned with her finger, and warm orbs of light floated out from the others in the hall and landed on Shah. Her skin was still a little cold, but it became smooth and responsive, and her eyes became even darker and brighter, like shining gems. This is a gift for our first meeting, a life force that Shah stole and gave to the little girl. Anything that belongs to someone else, the teacher will steal and give it to you. Your teacher loves you, and that love will remain unchanged until the most vibrant melody of your life has been sung. Under Shah's somewhat dazed gaze, Shah said some rather strange things. But this is indeed true, it is a favored expectation, a hope that she will become the Pale Empress who will one day wipe out the direct descendants of the Eggers family and subdue the entire Byron royal family. I see. However, Shah clearly misunderstood something. She showed a rare hint of surprise. After all, she was still so young. But she gritted her teeth and nodded in agreement. After all, this was someone who wasn't afraid of Aegis. And after thinking it through, she placed her hand on Shah's arm, which was holding her teacher. At that time, the young Shah was completely unaware of her misunderstanding, and many years later, she deeply regretted not taking advantage of the time they spent together to have sex with the teacher. Good boy, your teacher really wants to see your cool side. Shah smiled with satisfaction. He handed Shah a dagger that wasn't fancy but was definitely effective, then pointed to the bound man who, according to the Eggers family, was a sacrifice. Go, end his life. He carefully placed the girl on the ground. Shah also stepped forward decisively, swung his knife, and red blood flowed out. The girl didn't waste any blood. Following the so-called noble interests and family traditions, she completed a simple sacrificial ceremony before facing Shah. She wiped the blood off the blade with the hem of her skirt, picked it up with both hands, and handed it back to Shah. This is for you. Shah didn't take it. Instead, she beckoned with her finger, and the stain on the girl's skirt came off and was tossed aside. He's dead, what do you think? Shah asked his student. He didn't know how he would get along with Bernadette in the future, but he thought it would be different from Shah's. She was really a good girl. Dead is dead. Shah didn't understand why the teacher asked that question, but she answered anyway, sheathing her dagger and hiding it under her white skirt. She had long been accustomed to death in this environment. Death was death, and there was no afterwards. It's pretty simple, and actually quite good, but as your teacher, I have to teach you something, otherwise I might as well just feed you ice cream. Shah ignored Shah's hidden look, which seemed to be looking at him as if he were a weirdo. Looking at the lifeless, gradually cooling corpse in front of him, he said, the meaning of life lies in need. He needed it himself, even though we ignored it. Your father needed it, so he was tied up here as a sacrifice. I needed a teaching material, so he died prematurely, at your hands. You don't care, you have no need for him, so his death is his death. Shah squatted down, patted Shah's head, and asked with a smile, do you understand now? What do you need me to do? Shah understood and went straight to the point, asking directly through the door. I need you. Sha'ur thought for a moment and then said, "Help me get the Eggers family's treasure." Greater than. People in the travelogue. This is a day full of deception. However, Sha'ur was pleased to have gained another student who was even more lovable in terms of ideology. The fifth epic, the time before Mr. Fool was evicted from the door by his landlord, was truly peaceful and idyllic. Above, Golden Dream. Sha'ur sat in the captain's cabin, flipping through Grossel's Travels in his hands. His eyes were somewhat unfocused. As Archangel of the Spectator Pathway, he was also pondering whether a former deity with rich experience and a high status still needed to exhibit lust like an ordinary person. This unconventional world didn't offer him many tangible examples to reference. Those outer deities that exist based on specific symbols are not acceptable. The ancient gods seem to be a possibility, but the ancient sun god is not, especially Adam, who is hardly human. While one might argue that the other party has a more sophisticated way of enjoying themselves, how can a self-respecting person not trust the appeal of social interactions explicitly written into the underlying code? I guess I can be a bit lewd too. No one says that having been a hermit means you have to have a mental burden or an idol image to maintain. Sha'ur thinks this is reasonable, but there are no female pirates on Golden Dream, not even one who can do any manual labor. Even though the captain is a woman, it doesn't attract female pirates who are willing to risk their lives. Edwina needs to reflect on this. I glanced casually at the sea outside the window. General of Disease, Tracy was quite far from this area, so I decided not to call her over for an extra hour. It would be impolite to scare her. The thick travelogue he held open described ascetic snowman and his apprentice as they endured countless trials, with Klein encountering several people addicted to sanguine. In the glorious era of outer deity, Vampire Viscount was nearly wiped out by a group of sanguine summoned by the Viscount after a brutal attack by Justice. When communication failed, Klein desperately called out Lilith's name, which enraged the Vampire Viscount to the point of almost going berserk. Are humans now so arrogant that they can just call their ancestors by their own names? Even though sanguine has declined, its founder must not be dishonored. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, Klein recited Emlyn's macro history of sanguine directly, and then extended the topic to a friend of mine who seemed to have accepted a mission, but was a bit slow-witted, though I thought he would be a qualified sanguine savior. In short, this is a brief introduction to Emlyn. Having spent a long time in Bookworld and gotten used to living there with his fellow people, Vampire Viscount suddenly wanted to go out and see the world. Which unworthy descendant of sanguine taught such a shameless scoundrel to use his ancestor's name to swindle and deceive people? Walk, I'll go with you to learn the secrets, and we'll figure out a way to get out together. Driven by a desire to set things right, the unfortunate sanguine decided to continue searching for a way out. He was really unlucky because he was a pawn in Sha'ur's pursuit of Grossel's Travels, and was accidentally dragged into it by chance. At that time, Sha'ur was still a lackey of Storm Pathway. The journey continues, and in a hidden human settlement, these people encounter a Viscount from the Solomon Empire who has been living there. This is a member of the Zoroast family. It's a pity he's only in sequence 5, otherwise I would have been lucky enough to witness the White Emperor's heroic figure. The arrival of Klein and his group, due to an unexpected reason, exposed this gathering place. This village originally existed as slaves of the elves, and in the current social structure, it is positioned as a kind of pill bug. Now, the human Beander is hiding here and harboring suspects. Without reporting it, a team of elven rangers came to surround and kill them. This elven team is led by the forest elf lord, but the leader is close to a demigod. Klein and Edwina both felt they should run away. But ascetic snowman disagreed, feeling that he had a mission from the Lord and could not abandon his human companions. Klein was completely exasperated. These are all fake people from Bookworld, she said. And your master gave you the mission to go to Giant Royal Court and deliver a friendly message, not for you to wallow in self-pity here. Even with Edwina's pleas, and even though Snowman knew these ordinary humans were just fictional characters from the Bookworld, he still couldn't abandon these innocent people and run away. He couldn't deceive his own heart. He felt his mission was sacred, and therefore everything on this journey was real. Snowman is prepared to entrust the mission to Klein, sacrificing himself to buy time for the civilians. But Klein, who frequently ran dungeons, couldn't agree to that. The group could only work together to hold off the elf's army and buy time for the villagers to evacuate. Afterwards, they were routed by the elf's army. Klein and Mobit Zoroaster, somewhat disheveled, supported each other as they walked through the rainforest. Along the way, Mobit kept complaining about how inhuman the elves were. They treated them like slaves, and if they were caught, they might be fitted with special equipment and sent to mine in the sea. Heaven knows why these elves didn't go find coral, pearls, and other marine products themselves. This was clearly a product of labor reform. When Klein wondered, with Mobit with Sequence 5's strength, he shouldn't have fallen into slavery, there are still free people in Elven society. However, Mobit did not answer this question. Perhaps for thieves, individual freedom is more unbearable. There's a story behind it. Klein was curious, but Mobit didn't say anything. He didn't say either that she was a decisive and ruthless elf who would leave right after she was done with him, nor that she was a passionate and proactive but unfathomable giant. Anyway, he started telling Klein about all the good things that could be dug up underwater and how to hide some of them without anyone noticing. After a series of stumbles and falls, following Vampire Viscount of the Solomon Empire, and Soldier of the Kingdom of Lowen, he finally met Grossel, the protagonist of the travelogue's title, in the legendary Golden Kingdom. During the crossing, the familiar sense of déjà vu made Klein, who had just returned from the subordinate god battle ruins, somewhat suspicious. Humans, state your purpose. On the coast, a row of towering giants wielding axes and spears exuded a terrifying aura. These were not the cute barbarians who huddled together by the campfire at night, but rather a genuine cannibalistic race. I have come with the Lord's will. Ascetic Snowman stood at the bow of the ship, arms outstretched, the brilliant golden sunlight shining on the sea, as if illuminating the entire world in an instant. We hope to establish some kind of cooperation with giants. Snowman withdrew his arm, clasped his hands together, and bowed his head slightly, as if turning off a light, thus eliminating the light pollution. Isn't this a provocation? A Cyclops raised his hand, intending to smash the ship with his axe, but Grossel quickly stretched out her large hand to stop him. A world where truth and falsehood are indistinguishable. Grossel. The Cyclops was puzzled for a moment, then immediately understood. He laughed heartily, handed the axe to Grossel who reached out her hand, and whistled. His one eye looked at Grossel encouragingly, signaling her to go ahead and do as she pleased. Ah, no, this. Grossel reluctantly slung the axe over his shoulder and looked at his companions, saying, perhaps we should listen to what they have to say. All right, Grossel, since you've put it that way, we can give them a chance. The leading giant immediately retrieved his axe, then looked at the group on the ship. He ruled out the skinny, ascetic, the woman who looked weak, and the guy hiding behind her. His gaze swept over Gehrman, Anderson, Viscount Vampire, and Baron Solomon, finally settling on Gehrman Sparrow, who had a stern face. Why? Sanguine's aloofness was tolerable, but this human dared to put on such a sour face, which was probably quite impressive. Kid, you're the one. Let's have a fight. If you can win my approval, I'll allow you to go ashore. The giant leader raised his axe and pointed it at Gehrman Klein, shouting. This is at least a warrior of Sequence 5, and it has benefited from more than one set of traits. Who knows how many traits the giants of this era will benefit from in the mid to low sequence, and there might even be some that are affected by multiple traits. Klein was sweating bullets looking at the opponent's height, which was at least 3 meters. He didn't have a single secret puppet, and the unprepared magician was practically handing him over for free. He subtly nudged Anderson beside him with his elbow, thinking that if anyone was going to fight, it should be Hunter. Hunters can't fight warriors head-on either. What if I provoke them and they actually explode? How about we discuss it with them and decide on a team fight? I'll take command. Anderson didn't want to go in himself, so he decided to focus on team fights and gain some experience in commanding the team. Vampire Viscount didn't say anything, but handed Anderson a bottle of dark red potion. Judging from the expanding bubbles on it, it was for a power-up. Edwina pursed her lips slightly and handed Anderson a sealed artifact. Ascetic Snowman patted Anderson on the shoulder 3 times, granting him immunity to fear, a divine aura, and the power of justice, a triple buff to the somewhat apprehensive Anderson. Klein felt he should do something too, but he was short of money and had limited abilities, so he could only lean closer to Anderson and say cautiously, "Don't worry about anything, just fight with confidence. I can help you transfer physical damage to non-critical areas, so there won't be any fatal wounds." Viscount Mobit of the Solomon Empire added with a smile, "Even if you are injured by the power of the dawn, I can steal the dawn power that is hindering the healing of your wounds." This time, the Viscount of Sanguine remained silent, but instead produced another bottle of potion capable of healing wounds. Dog shit, you bunch of bastards. Anderson's face turned pale with anger, and he deeply regretted getting involved. He's the strongest bounty hunter at sea, don't portray him like Danitz. Although Anderson was angry, looking at the burly and tyrannical giant on the shore, he still drank the dark red blood potion. As his blood boiled, Anderson transformed into a dark red flaming spear and charged towards the shore of the Golden Kingdom. In less than half an hour, Klein and his group successfully reached the shore. Anderson lay limply on the beach, surrounded by a group of giants marveling at the young man. The Cyclops leader was also injured, but not seriously. With so many guardians present, even if Hunter could inflict true damage, these tanky monsters were too tough and could repeatedly stack armor. He then looked cheerfully at the ascetic group and laughed, "Humans, I acknowledge you." Damn it, Anderson, lying on the ground, really wanted to curse. Hunter isn't warrior. Without setting traps in advance and using tactics and schemes, he was forced to compete with giants in strength and endurance. I have come to establish a sacred partnership with you. As ascetic snowman spoke, Vampire Viscount came over and sprayed some magical perfume to help Anderson regain his spirituality. Danitz came over and helped Anderson up, saying, "You are the bravest hunter I have ever met." Danitz was quite impressed by Anderson's fierce punching display against the giant. Roll. Anderson didn't want to talk. On ascetic's side, the one-eyed leader looked at the outsiders and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to see the queen. Remember, when we bow our heads and kneel on one knee to pay our respects, you must not raise your heads if you don't want to stay in this twilight." The group set off. Grossel leaned closer to Vampire Viscount and asked, "Why are you here again?" Over such a long period of time in the book, Grossel the Giant and Vampire Viscount, among others, had already become acquainted. They said there was a chance to get out. You know, everyone who comes here by accident initially thinks they can definitely find a way out. I'm just taking this opportunity to relax and have some fun. Vampire Viscount said casually, not holding out much hope. On one hand, he didn't have high hopes for Klein and the others, and on the other hand, life in Book World wasn't so unbearable, everything here felt real. These two remained relatively calm, but Klein and Edwina were anything but. Who were they being taken to see? A queen, the Giant King, the goddess of harvest, Omibella. How could such a high-ranking figure exist in Book World? Grossel knew their doubts, but he couldn't explain them. That might not be the real queen, but he couldn't identify it as a fake. Whether he was outside or here, given his status, he almost never looked at the Giant King. Every time they met, he would kneel down and pay his respects in advance. How could he possibly dare to look directly at a god? Amidst this mix of trepidation and anticipation, Klein and his group arrived at a temple. The moment they stepped into the temple grounds, they sensed a vibrant life force. Even Anderson, who was being supported by Danitz, regained his strength. Although Anderson didn't have to come, the adventurer simply didn't want to miss it. This is a sacred feeling that cannot be described in words. The soul trembled instinctively, and the body involuntarily became restrained, imitating the movements of the giant guards around them, as if the fear was engraved in their bones, like a sensitive animal smelling the scent of a tiger. Even the act of kneeling was so natural, without the slightest hesitation or stiffness. By the time everyone realized what was happening, they had already heard that authoritative voice, "Hey, so Sun can resort to these petty tricks too." Greater than the linear arrangement of history. This majestic and divine voice left even the fanatical snowman speechless. Fanatics are simply fanatical believers, not mentally unstable. They choose to bow their heads when necessary so that they can better fulfill the Lord's mission. Klein and the others were pounding with anxiety, they were completely unable to react to the words of the Giant King Queen. Fortunately, they didn't need to answer. Snowman prayed softly, and a huge light appeared behind him. It's like light, just pouring down, not intense, and without needing to emphasize its power, no one would dare ignore the radiance from the sun. Time seemed to stand still in the hall, and even the senses were stripped away. By the time Klein and the others came to their senses, they had already left the palace and returned to the beach where they had landed. This is simply a miracle. Anderson murmured, feeling as if his heart had been purified. This is a miracle. Snowman emphasized that even if this world may not be real, the glory of the Lord is certainly sacred. Okay, so what's the next step? Anderson just wanted to know how to get out of here. Southward. The ascetic replied without hesitation. Why? Klein frowned, completely baffled as to why Snowman was so certain. Because according to the course of history, there will be another war between the Lord and the Elf King. At that time, many races would be involved, and we would not be safe no matter where we were. Only the South would be less affected. Snowman explained patiently. He even sounded a little regretful as he spoke. If he had the qualifications and ability to witness it, and if he knew that this world could never recreate that magnificence, he really wanted to leave behind a record of witnessing the Lord's glorious moment. Didn't you say you wouldn't die here? Flame. Mr. Danitz asked. Did you dare to raise your head inside the temple just now? Vampire Viscount gave him a cold look and said. Danitz kept quiet. He dared not, for if he looked up, he might really die. But the existence of this book is clearly related to dragons in some way. How do you know that things will develop the way you predicted, instead of the exact opposite? Klein doesn't believe that a travelogue, which may be biased by personal opinions, can truly reproduce history. Great beings do not rewrite history, and the rise of the Lord is an established fact. Snowman didn't understand why Klein would ask such a question. He hadn't considered this aspect at all. Even though he was wary of extraordinary races like elves, dragons, and giants, he was mostly acting from the perspective of their races. Even if he believes that it is entirely reasonable and correct for the Lord to reclaim his authority, he will not underestimate those who were once the Lord's opponents. These great beings may be cruel and tyrannical, but how could they deny the established facts? Nor would those declining extraordinary races use their gods to make such absurd and shameful jokes. How could it be impossible? Klein felt that Snowman worshipped too much of people, but Snowman also had a point. Those in positions of power might indeed disdain making such a blunder in a travelogue, and those who wanted to go out always had to explore. Let's go south then. If you want to go south, I can lead the way. Lowen's soldier Lonzel, who hadn't said much for so long, said. Sure. Klein nodded. It was a good thing to have someone who knew the way to lead the way. Moreover, Lonzel is trustworthy. After all, they are all Lowen people, so the generation gap will be much smaller. Can't we stay a little longer? Edwina was a little reluctant to leave, feeling that there were still many places in this golden kingdom to explore. Captain, I'll stay with you. Danitz's eyes lit up. This was an opportunity. I'm afraid that won't work. Grossel carried a large boat to the shore. The ship was so huge, yet he carried it like a shoulder pole and then threw it into the sea. Scattering means danger, and my compatriots may not be too welcoming to you. Grossel has been in the travelogue for so long that he knows the habits of these NPCs. When he is there, these giants are one way, but when he is not there, they revert to their true nature. Don't forget why we came in. Klein patted Danitz on the shoulder and was the first to walk towards the large ship on the sea. All he wanted to do now was get a good night's sleep. This book world was too bizarre. In some ways, it was even more bizarre, or absurd, than Grey Mist. The voyage at sea did not encounter many problems. Everyone here was very familiar with the sea environment, and even if there were occasional sea monsters, they would choose to retreat when they encountered the Sequence 5 crew. Edwina's regret lessened considerably, because according to Lonzel, if she wanted to conduct research, there would still be opportunities on the southern continent. However, Lonzel made it clear that this southern continent had nothing to do with the real southern continent, even though Lonzel had never seen what the southern continent looked like. The ship docked at Enmat Harbor, and from there, Edwina, Klein, and the others began to look rather strange. Enmat Harbor was an important port in Lowen, but now there's no one there. I've looked, but there's no one here. This place does resemble Lowen, but not entirely. I can't find my home in Backland here, or rather, I have found it, but I'm not sure. Lonzel looked in the direction of Backland, his eyes filled with indescribable complexity. He had found a home here, but that place was no longer his home. Can we wander around a bit? Klein looked at ascetic Snowman and asked. Yes, my gut tells me we're far enough away from the eye of the storm. Snowman, of course, wouldn't refuse. We can also walk separately, agree on a time, and then meet in Backland. Mobit suggested. He wanted to go to Intersea to take a look. Although the capital of the Solomon Empire might no longer be there, some ruins still remained. He was just a man of few words. In fact, after he learned a little about the Tudor dynasty and the Trenstein Empire from Lonzel, he was able to imagine the Zoroast family's predicament. I also want to travel around. Vampire Viscount also made the suggestion. He also hoped to find some traces of the past here. Everyone agreed, and the rest was up to them to explore. This continent is incomplete, discontinuous, irregular, and even its timeline is chaotic. The closer you are to Port Pritzker, the more modern the style becomes. The closer you are to the inland, the more ancient the atmosphere becomes. The creator of Book World. Lonzel's return to Backland is ambiguous. At least that's how it appears to him, but to Edwina and Danitz, it's incredibly familiar. Although Vice Admiral Iceberg and her friends aren't Lowen, this is the City of Wonders, Backland, the most bustling city on the North Continent. If you haven't been to Backland, haven't smelled its unique, damp air with a faint odor, your life is incomplete. It may not be a place to live, but it's perfect for taking photos. We didn't have these things back then. Lonzel looked at the steam train. He never imagined that such a massive thing could run. In the past, he would always walk back slowly, since there wasn't even a horse here. Captain, you can drive a steam train. Danitz was also surprised. Although he had become the one adding coal to the truck, it was a great honor to serve the captain. The principle is simple. When you can build a train, how can you not use it? Edwina ignored Danitz's words. She was looking at Backland with curiosity. It was very similar to the Backland she had visited before, but how could Book World be replicated? She had had the book for quite some time. Before she found the book, it should have been in a shipwreck at the bottom of the sea. Is this a work by craftsmen? No. Church of Steam and Machinery. Along the way, Lonzel also learned some of the history of later generations from Danitz. He couldn't just watch Danitz add coal all by himself. Yes, have you found your home? Edwina looked around as she answered Lonzel's questions. Like a curious child, she looked everywhere and opened some rooms to observe. Apart from the fact that no one was there, the place seemed quite realistic. The house was well equipped with living facilities, and even the wardrobe contained the latest fashions. Captain, I've discovered gold. Danitz's voice rang out in surprise as he held an open safe containing gold, jewelry, and banknotes. Of course, as a proper pirate, before presenting the confirmed loot to the captain, Danitz took a bite first. If he could bite it, it was good gold. Edwina was all right, she wasn't that interested in money. Lonzel, on the other hand, had even less interest. He initially collected some money, but later realized it was useless here and discarded it. Are you going to keep this safe with you from now on? Lonzel smiled. Danitz's expression froze, but he still couldn't give up. He stuffed a few pieces of jewelry into his pocket, then picked up a small gold bar and retorted, "Can't I just chew on it for fun? Gold is good for teeth." Danitz clutched the gold bar, feeling quite pleased with himself. He was even willing to use it as a stick. He would never have been willing to part with it if he were outside. A smile flickered in Edwina's eyes. Ignoring Danitz, she looked at Lonzel and asked, "Can you still find your house?" "I'm not sure if that's my home." Lonzel smiled bitterly, "It's not the same as I remember it. And judging from the layout, my room is gone. The style of the decoration is like it was for another boy. It no longer belongs to me." Both Edwina and Danitz fell silent upon hearing this. Things have changed, but people are no longer the same. That is indeed cruel. Klein traveled from Enmat Harbor through East Chester County, along land and water routes, until he arrived in Akova County, passing through Tingen as well. The whole journey felt like time was playing backwards. As a history major, Klein was able to see things in the city that should have been obsolete. Tingen, this famous university city, was different from what he remembered. It seemed that the farther away from the sea, the more ancient the atmosphere of the era. But he still found Narcissus Street, even though it had nothing to do with him. After all, the Moretti family were proletarians, they didn't own any property in Tingen, so they had nothing to be nostalgic about. Klein arrived at St. Serena's church in Tingen. The interior of the church hadn't changed much. Following his memory, he found a secret passage at the back of the church that led directly to Tingen City. The underground space where the Nighthawks are located. It seems that Tingen the Nighthawks squad's base has never moved, so seeing a familiar place was quite touching. As Klein walked through Charn's Gate and saw the familiar sealed artifacts, his lips twitched involuntarily. He looked at the most precious relic here, the ashes of Saint Serena, a first-class sealed artifact. Even this is here. This is terrifying. After confirming that the sealed artifact was indeed usable, Klein felt that Grey Fog space wasn't so impressive after all. It can even reconstruct the past Tingen, as well as the sealed artifact preserved in Tingen, which is somewhat beyond common sense. Intersea County. Mobit Zoroaster stands forlornly in the former capital of the Solomon Empire. Everything here is so similar to his time, but now he is all alone. If this is a dream, then I'm quite a failure as a dream stealer. Mobit's mindset was relatively normal. After all, he had prayed to the old man when he first entered Book World, but it was to no avail. He could block the prayers directed at Archangel, and the old man had probably contacted him, or at least performed divination, but there was still no news. This spoke volumes. Pallas Zoroast did search for his great-grandson, but ultimately found nothing, and could only focus his suspicions on Aemon and Jacob. He couldn't ask, otherwise Aemon would admit it. Not only will they admit it, but they'll also ask which great-grandson it is, saying he's been eating a bit too much lately. Jacob will definitely deny it, regardless of whether he did it or not. The Viscount of Sanguine encountered some Sanguine tribes in the central highlands of the Fainapotter Kingdom. There are mostly castles here, and some are even simpler, located directly inside caves. He skillfully entered a cave, took out a bottle of red wine from a room, and said, "The blood inside still tastes so sweet. Unfortunately, there's no one here, and it's a bit far. It's nice to have a resource point that refreshes supplies, but it's just too lonely. Even a reclusive race like the Sanguine can't stand staying here for long." These tourists were so engrossed in exploring the North Continent that they forgot about the elf mentioned in the travelogue, and even Grosel forgot about it in the existence of Shiatas. Beyond the travelogue, in the captain's cabin of the Golden Dream, looking at the increasingly realistic Grosel's travels in his hands, Sha'ur wondered if God Almighty also had another title, the creator of book worlds. Greater than. Absolute truth. If they were allowed to come out, a whole bunch of them would die. Sha'ur didn't really want to know how Klein, Edwina, and the others would feel if they came out and found themselves 10 years older. This travelogue has been drastically altered beyond recognition. How could you possibly visit any of the attractions within it without paying a door ticket? 10 years. The impact is minimal, so let's leave it at that. As long as the aftereffects are delayed, they won't notice them for the time being. Points are deducted directly without any payment prompts, so there's no psychological burden. Sha'ur ignored this issue and didn't intend to target Grossel and the others who had mistakenly entered the travelogue. Of course, they could come out without dying, because people can't die repeatedly. They were still alive and could leave the book world. But outside, when they feel that they deserve to die, as human beings, they will die just like normal people due to war, disease, or old age. These NPCs will reappear in book world, but the reappearing NPCs will not feel that they do not belong to book world. When Klein and the others reunited in Backland, it was obvious that everyone there was a time constraint. Even if they could leave book world, would they truly be safe? These people weren't without their predictions, they were all at least in the middle of sequence 5. They just didn't say it outright. Vice Admiral Iceberg noticed the time distortion in the North Continent and could also think of this, but he had no way to solve it. However, time didn't give these people the chance to remain silent or feel sad. A violent sea wind came from the north, and from a great distance, it caused a terrifying earthquake in this miraculous city, as if it were the roar of the thunder god. Intense light pollution followed closely behind, instantly robbing everyone of their sight. Daytime was even more unbearable than nighttime, and all that could be done was to close one's eyes. Although it was only a faint trace of divinity, it still made the soul tremble and shake. As the light gradually dimmed, the entire sky was covered with numerous cracks, the tsunami had not yet stopped, and the earthquakes and erupting volcanoes continued to roar and unleash their terror. At the largest crack in Backland, a door of light appeared. That was where the cracks in the sky and the fissures in the earth intersected, and more disasters were yet to come, with boulders covered in magma falling like a beautiful meteor shower. "Run!" someone shouted, and everyone moved toward the light door, escaping the soon-to-be ending theater before the earth collapsed. Swish, swish, swish. The captain's cabin of Vice Admiral Iceberg was packed. Because of the presence of the giant Grossel, Klein, who was faster, had been pushed out onto the corridor. Klein quickly turned around and looked at Mobit, who had thrown him out. Mobit smiled nonchalantly at Klein, took a deep breath as if to feel the outside air one last time, and then closed his eyes. Vampire Viscount also sighed and offered a final prayer to the progenitor Lilith. The somber atmosphere made Vice Admiral Iceberg look sadly at Grossel, who had covered their retreat, her back still bearing a huge, bloody gash, with a sharp volcanic rock lodged in it. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Mobit opened his eyes and stared at Klein, wondering if everything was all right, or if they, these ancient people, would die in the next second, or the second after that. After all, no one in Sequence 5 could live for thousands of years, while some of them had lived for 2,000 or 3,000 years. Are you really all right? Lonzel stretched his arms and nudged Ascetic Snowman. What do you think? This must be God's blessing. Ascetic Snowman said matter-of-factly. I believe you. However, Lonzel nodded affirmatively. Don't we have to die? The ancient Viscount of Sanguine, finding himself still alive, tentatively offered a prayer to his lineage's ancestor, a Duke of Sanguine. This Duke was no ordinary Sanguine. Before being unexpectedly drawn into the travelogue, he was a direct descendant of the Sanguine, a guaranteed Count of Sanguine, the kind of marquis in the clan who was entitled to inherit the estate upon his death. The prayer was answered, a soft blush fell, soothing Vampire Viscount's mental tension and anxiety. Guys, does this mean we're really not going to die? Although the response was limited, it was enough to prove that they were alive. Why isn't the old man replying to me? Could he be dead? Another second-generation Mobit muttered to himself. It's not so far-fetched that Sequence 5 prayed to the angels and received a response. Both of them are direct descendants of the angels, and it's a must for them to borrow the power of the angels in their clan through mysterious rituals when they encounter danger. It's not only the tarot club that can summon people. Should we treat Grossel's wound first? Danitz wiped the sweat from his face and was about to say something when suddenly, the sharp-eyed Klein noticed something. Why is your gold necklace still around your neck? Standing at the edge, Klein, who had temporarily prevented the crew of the Golden Dream from surrounding him, turned around and realized something was wrong. Danitz was startled. He looked down and saw that the gold necklace around his neck was indeed still there. He quickly opened his canvas bag and found that the handful of gems he had grabbed from Backland were also still there. When I came out, I actually threw away the gold bars because I thought they were in the way. My gold bars. Danitz was filled with regret. He lost the gold bars at the last minute because he was too slow. This is not scientific. Klein stared at Danitz's canvas bag filled with jewels and a gold necklace, utterly bewildered. As a modern person educated in omniscience, jewels were one thing, but how could gold possibly be brought out? Aren't the conditions for gold's formation extremely demanding? More importantly, the gold is real, but what about the sealed artifact? He saw Tingen after seeing the sealed artifact in Nighthawks. I immediately concluded that it was all fake. Alright, it's just a gold bar. Vampire Viscount glanced at Danitz with some disdain. He offered to help Grossel treat her wounds. To him, being alive was a blessing. Ha ha. Grossel chuckled and tossed out half of the broken and damaged gold bar. Just as he was about to leave, he picked up the gold bar that Danitz had thrown down to block it, and now he had half a bar left in his hand. Grossel, I love you so much. Although the gold was a bit dirty and had become a lumpy mess, Danitz still happily gave Grossel a bear hug. However, Anderson accepted the gold first, saying, as a bounty hunter, it's a disgrace to almost go home empty-handed. Fools sometimes have good luck. Anderson muttered something. No, what about me? Klein looked at Vice Admiral Iceberg, who had taken such a great risk and gained nothing, even losing his suit in the process. However, to Klein's disappointment, Vice Admiral Iceberg wasn't interested in that at the moment. She looked at Lonzel with sparkling eyes and asked, are you still the disciplinary knight from Sequence 5? Fool begins his performance. Certainly. Lonzel paused for a moment, then answered. You became Deander by gradually consuming potions in the book world. Edwina asked again, this time speaking much faster. Yes. Lonzel was puzzled, but answered anyway. This time, Klein and the others realized that the potion ingredients in Bookworld were real. What exactly is this thing? Edwina walked to the table and looked at the travelogue, but the cover of the book had changed. The symbols for Grossel's travels had disappeared, and the book looked like an ordinary history book. She opened the contents, which contained some historical knowledge, but it was still in the form of a travelogue, recording the history experienced by several main characters. Pages that could not be opened before could now be opened, but the backs were all blank, and it was impossible to see much mystery. If it weren't for the large number of people in the inappropriate setting, Edwina would have actually wanted to capture a pirate, smear the pirate's blood on the cover, and see if he could still enter the book world. Thank you for your help this time. I'll arrange rooms for you to rest first, and we'll talk about pay after I've calmed the crew down. Edwina held up the travelogue, and spoke to Klein and Anderson, the two foreign players. Okay. Klein had no objection. Vice Admiral Iceberg wouldn't renege on the debt, nor would he appear too eager, as that would be rude. After a brief chat, everyone returned to the lounge arranged by Golden Dream to rest. After Edwina returned to her room, she was startled before she could even do her research, because Sha'ur was sitting in the chair in front of her desk and waved to her when she came in. Hi, I've tried it. If you smear blood on your skin, you won't be able to get in after that. He lied without batting an eye. Edwina looked slightly disappointed upon hearing this, but this was to be expected. Why did you come here? She found a place to sit down. Judging from Sha'ur's appearance, she must have arrived a long time ago, and the Golden Dream crew hadn't even noticed her. Your dear sailor also wrote to me, but I arrived a little late, and your other crew members don't know me. I read about your experience in Book World. What an amazing adventure. You guys are incredibly lucky to be alive. Sha'ur's words made Edwina feel somewhat ashamed, because it meant that the crew she had diligently taught clearly did not take the book that had caused her disappearance that seriously, which was why Sha'ur was able to grasp these things through the book's automatically updated content. I will definitely make up for the missed lessons for them later. Edwina thought to herself. The next day, Edwina found Klein and wanted to talk to him about her payment. Klein has the choice, money or her collection. Would that travelogue work too? Klein asked tentatively. He felt it was necessary to pay close attention to this strange thing. Of course, but I must warn you, its mystery may have been hidden, or it may have disappeared. Edwina nodded. She hadn't slept last night and hadn't figured it out yet, but Klein could try if he wanted. Sha'ur met Edwina for this reason, otherwise, Edwina might not have been willing to give it up. Then I choose this book. Klein ultimately chose the travelogue, mainly because he had been exposed to gray fog in the bathroom the previous night and realized he had forgotten about the female elf who was supposed to be mentioned in the travelogue, and everyone else had forgotten about it too. He tentatively inquired about the Book of Calamity and learned the female elf's name, Shiatas. If you discover anything, I hope we can exchange related knowledge in the future. If you like the key to death, I can give you a reasonable price, on the same terms. Edwina didn't just give it away for free. After all, it was the common property of all the crew members, not just hers alone. Klein did not refuse, and after receiving his payment, he played Golden Dream for a few days without worry. Those ancient people who ran out of book world are also learning about the fifth epic, and studying Lonus and such. Grossel, as an old relic left over from the second epic, has the most to learn, and given her huge size, she will stay on Golden Dream for a while. Vice Admiral Iceberg would also be welcome. Although this era is somewhat unfamiliar, there is never a worse time in life. Even Lonzel plans to go home to see, and, if necessary, provide some help to his brother's descendants. Gray Fog Space. Klein looked at the travelogue on the table. He had first consulted a fortune teller in Gray Fog Space about the dangers of bringing the travelogue there, which is why he chose to do this. Klein had a premonition that placing the travelogue alongside the Book of Calamity might lead to some changes, but being cautious as he was, he decided to do more divination and less action. Is this the uniqueness of the spectator pathway? He consulted a fortune teller, and the answer was negative. If it's not uniqueness, then it's not that dangerous. Gray Fog Space's status should be no worse than uniqueness's, and it should be able to suppress all sorts of strange things below uniqueness. Its origin. Klein felt relieved and immediately used dream divination, closing her eyes and entering a dream. Light appeared in the gray world, and a huge floating island emerged. On the massive stone pillars, dragons of various attributes coiled. In the central hall, a book with a yellowish-brown cover floated in midair, with a shadow trailing behind it. It was a creature sitting on a throne, with pale gold eyes like a dragon king. Nice to meet you again. Fool. Sha'ur propped her head up with one hand, and even without close inspection, one could feel the trembling of the dream itself. This seemed to indicate the mood of the dream's owner. Perhaps due to path dependence, Klein always liked to use dream divination on the items left behind by the spectator. Dreams are also the authority of the spectator. Confuse. You don't need that. For visionary, spiritual interaction is mental interaction, and mental interaction is limited omniscience. Sha'ur waved his hand, and the dream world began to expand. The dream that should have been in Klein's mental world began to manifest externally, instead enveloping his spirit. Half of the Tarot Club's office space appeared in Levhead, City of Miracles, with a palace of gray mist on one side and a kingdom of dragons on the other. Klein was at a disadvantage because he was facing a spectator who knew him in every way. Even ordinary people can anticipate certain attitudes of acquaintances when they are facing them, let alone spectator. Were you waiting for me? As expected, just as Sha'ur had predicted, after a brief silence, Fool clasped his hands together, rested his head on the back of his hands, and spoke with curiosity and doubt rather than fear and panic. The Transmigrator Paradox. Mr. Fool panicked after discovering that the fortune-telling had crashed again. Moreover, the enhancement from Gray Fog Space's realistic perspective was still present, allowing Fool to perceive that the humanoid creature's form was illusory, but he dared not actually expose this falsehood. Because even the mysterious symbols that permeate the air are incredibly irritating, imagine the consequences of staring directly at mythical creatures. Sha'ur is certainly far inferior to the real dragon of imagination, but one of the great features of the spectator pathway is the power of the mind. When Klein felt that this was the authentic dragon of imagination, then to him it was the real dragon of imagination. If not intentionally restrained, the majesty of the ancient god would be presented without any discount. I have predicted many future possibilities. You have brought me valuable information. Sha'ur raised her hand, the golden vertical pupils in her eyes disappeared, and her hair turned into a mix of pure black and dark blue. Quill of Alzuhad, Book of Calamity, Grossel's Travels, Dream Blessing. You've been exposed to far too many things that I'm familiar with. This was said in Mandarin. Sha'ur intended to give Mr. Fool some instructions instead of leaving him to guess. If the truth about time travel is truly cruel, then aren't Lonzel and the others suffering just as much? They just comforted Lonzel, or saw Lonzel being comforted, only to have their own Dao hearts collapse when it happens to them. Sha'ur still understands his fellow villagers. Humans are social animals, and an individual's ability to cope increases with the existence of precedents within the group. Are you Elf King? Mr. Fool's head buzzed. Chinese, he was talking about Chinese. This was that ancient god from the first generation, his fellow villager. Why does he feel like he's haunting us? And isn't this a bit too heaven-defying? Is this a conversation across the river of time? Just daydreaming. Can Storm Pathway predict the future? What exactly is your pathway? Mr. Fool was unsure. If this was an old god, then the pathway was truly difficult to define. So who exactly are you? Grossel's Travels is a work by Anquelt. But I used it to get this conversation done. Sha'ur didn't answer directly, which was difficult to explain, and Klein might not have understood it either. Do you know the truth about time travel? For some reason, Klein still chose to ask the question that he both longed to know and feared to know. Haven't you seen this book before? As Shah finished speaking, Grossel's travels began to spin, showing images of the giant Grossel, the elf Shiatas, and the ascetic snowman unexpectedly entering the travelogue. Travelogue. Gray fog space. Grossel. Lonzel. Time. Can't go back. Klein instantly connected everything. This gray fog is an alternative version of Grossel's travels. Due to some accident, or rather coincidence, he triggered something, and by the time he left gray fog space, everything had changed. At least Lonzel could return to the drastically changed backland. He found even the moon in the sky unfamiliar. Why? You're saying this is our world. How could such strange things exist in our world? Klein should have been excited and jumped up, but he didn't even have the strength to stand up. Extreme depression and intense disappointment were wearing down his will. If it weren't for the first generation's presence in front of him, which made him dare not relax, and the guidance and comfort he had given to Lonzel earlier, which were now having some effect, Klein would have liked to just lie on the table and quietly like that. But he can't. Lonzel was able to face reality, and he should muster his courage too. Besides, there are still many things he hasn't figured out. Fool raised his head, his eyes rekindling with a stubborn fire. You ask me why? Humans haven't even fully understood their own gene chain, haven't calculated pi to its end, haven't been able to create Doraemon or the magic phone, and haven't been able to break the 120-year lifespan limit. Who knows if there really are some supernatural or mysterious things? The authorities say they believe in science, but they employ extraordinary people. Everyone says that myths originated from the imagination of ancient humans, but no one can say for sure about the dragon-walking thing. Is human civilization older than the Jurassic period? The Earth doesn't really need humans anymore, but what about in the vast and boundless universe? Human beings are a general term for a species. Other similar species include the Yangtze River sturgeon, the Bali tiger, and the Chinese rhinoceros, all of which have gone extinct in the years we know them. Do you think that just because I am a powerful ancient god, I am entitled to know everything? I do indeed possess authority and wisdom. As a high-ranking being in the realm of the mind, I can tell you a little-known fact: there is no pure consciousness independent of experience and memory. Still confused? Let me explain. Simply put, a blank spirit doesn't exist, a blank can only be a you. Plate. The essence of carbon-based life is no different from a bunch of silicon-based materials. You could assemble a computer in the past, and I can now create a physical body. You can connect a computer to the internet, and I can also give this physical body unique humanity and consciousness. Quote, you still don't understand. Okay, let me put it simply. In other words, time travel doesn't exist. The most important thing for a person is thinking, consciousness, and the understanding of themselves and their environment. What is the common concept of time travel? It's a soul, carrying its memories, arriving in another world. To put it simply, an electronic chip, carrying massive amounts of data and computational models, arrives in another country, connects to another device, and passes a test. Only when the chip can function can the data inside be read, your memory be accessed, and the AI model trained with a large amount of data in the chip continue to operate. Only then can you have normal reasoning ability, and only then are you truly yourself. That's such a demanding requirement. I really can't imagine that people of my generation who went through 9 years of compulsory education would believe in something like time travel. Shah-Ur's incredulous tone was so pronounced. He seemed to be saying, "You're asking me. I know nothing, I'm just an ancient god." It's as if it's saying, "Why do you have to ask everything? Didn't you learn dialectics when you went to university?" In short, Klein's thinking was completely influenced by Shah-Ur. One moment he was thinking about gene chains and pi, and the next he was complaining that the ancient god's mention of Doraemon and the dream phone was a bit of a departure from his character. Then, he would acknowledge the so-called 120-year lifespan limit, and then he would start reminiscing about whether Earth really had mysterious powers in the past, but the information was hidden by the authorities, and whether the fortune-changing ritual he saw was immortal magic, or extraordinary. As Shah-Ur continued to talk, Klein's CPU was running at high speed, and for a moment he forgot about his sadness. Greater than black hole theory. Under the cover of the gray fog, Mr. Fool looked at Shah-Ur with a strange expression. He seemed to be saying, "Time travel is such a ridiculous thing, why are you trying to explain science, logic, or dialectics to me? Suddenly you open your eyes and wake up in a strange world, and there's also a mysterious space related to time travel. You'll start to wonder if this is a real time travel or a fake one. What's wrong with you? And how can you be so indifferent, describing yourself as a mental model? Did you eat the concept of the soul? Mr. Fool really wanted to pick up a keyboard and have a 300-round battle with Shah, but his mind was in a mess right now. There wasn't a keyboard here where he could just type out random stuff, and his modern manners prevented him from doing something as rude as verbally attacking someone face to face. Do all things possess a spirit? A spiritual resurgence. A cataclysmic change in the world. An ancient Taoist temple opens, and demons and monsters undergo transformation first, leading to the demise of human civilization. A break in the continuity of pre-civilization. Fool, Klein immediately thought of many things, but he didn't want to ruin his image along with Shah in front of him. The other party didn't care what he said because he was a true ancient god, but once he peeled off the wolf's skin of Fool, he would become an ordinary little lamb. Yes, anyone with a basic understanding of modern physics knows that the universe as a whole is a process of increasing entropy. It's like a long, flowing river. The essence of our existence is to achieve a local entropy reduction by accelerating the increase of entropy in the external environment. There was nothing wrong with that in itself. The problem is that, on Earth, the entity that best represents the consciousness of Earth is no longer human, but the gods we know. Imagine that the increase in entropy of the universe is a river, and the initial decrease in entropy of the human population on Earth is just a tiny, insignificant whirlpool which can only be considered a bubble in the vast universe. And now, there's a group of gods, and what we all know, the Beander characteristic aggregation law. Even in the entire universe, gods are rare individuals. These gods are all converging, and at the cost of accelerating the overall entropy increase of the universe, they are maintaining their own local entropy reduction. What used to be insignificant bubbles have suddenly become huge vortexes. Guess what will happen if we add spiritual variables and the overall trajectory of the universe differs from the predictions of macroscopic physics from the old era? Shah sat up straighter and looked at Fool with great interest, asking a question. Where is this? For a moment, Mr. Fool thought he was back in a university elective class lecture hall. Furthermore, in a transcendent world, you, a dignified ancient god, are you talking to me about physics? Is that right? Do you guys do this much research on second epoch? So why Rosal did the steam engine only, invent, in the fifth epoch? Despite the tu sao, meaning to criticize or ridicule Mr. Fool, a former keyboard warrior who knows a little about everything, adopted a more relaxed attitude and asked, "You're not going to say that Earth is undergoing nuclear fusion that we can't see, like the sun, are you?" Clever. Shah hadn't expected Klein to be so perceptive or intuitive. He added, "The extraordinary pathway, the path of sequence, is like a nuclear fusion chain, a progressive process. Every deity standing at the pinnacle of the sequence is open black lens bracket sun close black lens bracket. We all know that although the sun is dazzling, there are things in the universe that are even more terrifying than the sun." Quote, "The Beander characteristic aggregation law can be seen as a kind of manifestation and reinforcement of the second law of thermodynamics at a mysterious level. One sun is terrifying enough. There are so many open black lens bracket suns close black lens bracket on Earth now. I don't need to explain the existence of stars. The inward collapse force generated by mass and the huge energy released outward by massive nuclear fusion are in balance for stars to exist stably. The instinct of Beander characteristic to aggregate, and the gods' actions of anti-aggregation out of their own consciousness, are key to maintaining this balance." Shah explained with a smile. "If sun runs out of fuel and gravity wins, the star may collapse into a black hole. Earth has so many star-sized units." Mr. Fool was startled by his own guess. It must be fake. What black hole theory are you talking to me about in this mysterious world? Are there really open black lens bracket black holes close black lens bracket? After a moment of silence, Mr. Fool could not suppress his curiosity. We generally refer to this as the great creator awakening from its slumber, taking everything back to itself, punishing the greedy and insatiable beings of the present world, and creating a new world. Shah waved his hand. What black hole? Even if the superstar overlord wanted to create a black hole by hand, there would be a skill cooldown. Depend on. This is not the doomsday prophecy spread by many secret churches and cults. Is this something you guys came up with? Mr. Fool became increasingly confused as he listened, and for a moment he forgot what questions he should ask next. Alright, that's all for this conversation. I look forward to seeing you next time. After Shah satisfied his desire to be a teacher, the space he was in began to blur. Wait, how exactly did the pre-existing civilization perish? Klein, not to be out of his mind, quickly asked a crucial question. Oh, the little ball exploded. Didn't you say it yourself? Spiritual energy is reviving. The overall density of the Earth's environment has increased 2 or 3 times, etc. As for how many times the Earth's density has increased now, calculate it yourself. Shah disappeared along with the dream, and gray mist space was restored. Klein sat in Fool's chair with a somewhat bewildered expression. Earth's density doubled. Mr. Fool was thinking about how to verify it, but he couldn't think of how to calculate it for a moment. After a while, he suddenly looked up and thought, wait a minute, the Earth's density has doubled, but why do I feel that ordinary people haven't changed much? Did this, first generation, really not lie to him? What are the Earth's current mass and volume? Did so many gods make the Earth heavier? I don't know. Does the second epic study these things as well? I didn't see any modern scientific information in Grossel's travels. It can't be older than the second epic, can it? At this moment, Klein even had a slight doubt. Was Shah not a time traveler like him and Rosal? Could this guy be a survivor of the destruction of a previous civilization? First era, which, normal time traveler, would use modern physical logic to deconstruct mysticism in a world with a complete mystical system. Rosal's reaction is more like that of a normal time traveler. The other person's behavior is more like that of someone who, before the mystical system was established, used an old knowledge system to deconstruct these unknown changes, forming certain habits that have continued to this day. Researchers who hid in laboratories or shelters and did not meet with misfortune in the early stages of the disaster. Mr. Fool's intuition remained sharp, and he immediately guessed Grisha's background. How pitiful is Zeratul. College graduates these days are so easily fooled. Shah opened her eyes from the recliner, a faint smile on her lips. Admittedly, as long as one uses an unfamiliar but empathetic persona to expose certain things, then dear Mr. Fool will not suffer from mental illness due to the realities involved. When faced with real-life hardships and encountering others who may have experienced even greater suffering, men are often too embarrassed to shed tears. How much Klein imagines is none of Shah business. Klein is not yet a demigod, his rank is too low to understand the mystical knowledge beyond the sequence. But physics is much safer. The knowledge on the real world, the truly valuable, high-level knowledge that can be called treasures, is incomprehensible to him and is not as corrupting as mystical knowledge. The demon of knowledge is capable of connecting reality, mystery, matter, and energy through information, which is itself quite abstract. Shah extended his left hand, and two flames ignited at his fingertips. The two flames were indistinguishable, but one flame was at least a product of hydrogen and oxygen, while the other was a flame that defied all reason. When the two flames overlapped, a slight disharmony appeared. In a world where the laws of physics and the laws of the mystical coexist, whichever level is higher will be distorted, which is why it is unstable. It is like a product pieced together from various sources, full of contradictions. Contradictions will lead to chaos, and the ultimate chaos and disorder will be the return to order. Shah extinguished the two flickering flames at her fingertips, rolled over, and lay back down. Today was another day of giving up. Monday, May 2nd. Shah treated Klein to a meal. He celebrated his return to Byam alive and took the opportunity to see the 9,000 pounds Beander weapon, Death Knell. It was clear that Klein's mind was still a bit muddled, but even when people are confused, they don't lack fighting spirit. In order to shift his attention, Klein focused on advancing to demigod status, since Shah's ambiguous answer earlier had given Klein a great sense of crisis. After sending Shah away, Klein summoned Rhodes to inquire about the whereabouts of the bizarro sorcerer potion recipe. My esteemed master, your loyal servant Rhodes has finally caught up with you once again. It's clear that the mirror's emotions are still active. Not only that, it even used a wireless telegraph to send a smug emoji. Great master, ruler of the spirit world, I can sense that you are one step closer to returning to the holy throne. Has something good happened? You have a lot of questions. Klein nodded in response, then asked Rhodes about the whereabouts of the bizarro sorcerer potion recipe. Rhodes, power distorted the paper, revealing a somewhat blurry image, a dimly lit hall containing a huge, writhing creature, but the depiction or the image quality was extremely blurry. Master, this is Zeratul, he is being promoted to Sequence 1. He lost control during the Attendant of Mysteries arc, but this might have been a trap, the guy is very cunning. Rhodes gave a scathing review, then explained that Zeratul only gave Secret Order finished potions, so they were a no-go. As for why the image quality was blurry, the reason was that looking directly at such a monster would cause harm. The second and third pictures are much simpler. Honeke's Mountains, Antigonus family notebook in St. Samuel's Church. As for other possibilities, Rhodes did not mention them, it was merely a mirror that issued missions. Very good, it's your turn to ask a question. Klein thought for a moment and then said, Master, I must make up for my greetings. March 4, 1327 was the birthday of this body of yours. Please forgive me for not being able to keep up with you at that time. Can you forgive my incompetence? Rhodes' message was extremely humble. Ah, Klein was taken aback. It was the original owner's birthday. He thought of Benson and Melissa, feeling a pang of sadness and guilt, but his gaze softened as he looked at Rhodes. I forgive you. Thank you for your kindness and understanding. Rhodes sent a bowing emoji and was about to leave. Your origins. However, after Shaw ended conversations at his own whim, Klein had already mastered it. He does now somewhat acknowledge Rhodes, but there's a prerequisite for accepting it, figuring out its origins. He believed that one must be wary of anything whose depths are unknown, and he held the same view on the first generation of time travelers. The other party intentionally withheld a lot of information, but clearly had their own plans. Although it might not be detrimental to them, this ancient god was different from Rosal. Rhodes paused for 2 seconds, then sent a new image. Slippery liquid gushed from the holes in the ground, turning into viscous monsters. A point of light was ejected and combined with the stone, evolving into an intricately patterned silver mirror. On the other side, Shaw was also looking at a silver mirror, in which he could see a dark palace and wriggling cocoons. The so-called vulnerability of observation to reverse attacks did not materialize. Am I really that awful? Shaw asked, seeing the translucent worm with 12 rings wriggling on the silkworm cocoon. No, Shaw, I saw it at the time, you just did it on a whim. Rhodes certainly knew how to say it, and it believed it to be true. How convenient is it? Shaw asked one more question. I just saw him on the edge of the cliff and gave him a push. Rhodes's answer wasn't very tactful either. Why did it have to come to this? Shaw was speechless. His historical projection was cut off by Evernight Goddess and imprisoned in a hidden town. His real body was also parasitized by Worm of Time. Why did he have to suffer like this when Sequence 2 was perfectly fine? The leader of the new generation of angels almost disguised himself as a villainous supporting character. So theoretically, Shaw is controlling a runaway little Zaradul in the 5th epic. This laid the groundwork for all communication with Saphira Castle. None of the 3 great families of mystery, except for dear Mr. Fool, met a good end. Is the Lord of the Mysteries important? After experiencing more and more things, Shaw felt more and more that, over a longer period of time, fear was never the direct danger from outside Earth. Do you want to become the ruler of Spirit World? Rhodes countered with a question. I don't really want to, but it's okay. The absence of a Spirit World ruler does not prevent me from being the Lord of the Spirit World. Shaw quite likes Saphira Castle, but dislikes Lord of the Mysteries. She feels that becoming Lord of the Mysteries means wriggling around like a worm in all sorts of things, and she doesn't really want to face the celestial being who may have only lived for less than 500 years. 1. A mistake. Whether I become the Lord of the Mysteries or not is not important. But it's best not to have a God Almighty or a Lord of the Mysteries until I complete the closed loop. Shaw didn't hide anything from his old buddies. He only wants to complete the historical loop first, and then he can just pick any Saphira with his feet. Rhodes did not answer. It tried to show the scene inside the Honekes Mountains, but due to the seal of Evernight Goddess, it could not shine into the interior of the palace. It could only comfort Shaw in another way, saying, you can try a different approach. I think so too. Shaw nodded knowingly. After all, he was a psychiatrist and wouldn't easily have problems. What kind of lifestyle is natural and relaxed? That is to communicate easily and pleasantly with everyone, whether they are gods in the heavens or ordinary people. Time quickly came to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was a long-awaited tarot club gathering. Shaw caught a glimpse of Miss Justice gracefully rising to offer her daily greeting. Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. Good afternoon, Mr. Angel. She seemed to be in a good mood, perhaps because Beyander's abilities could help her family. Compared to Miss Justice, Hanged Man was more conflicted and struggling, probably because of money worries. Otherwise, Hanged Man wouldn't have frowned so easily. Mr. Fool, I have collected 3 pages of Rosel's diary. Shaw did provide Klein with some of her diary entries. He could actually provide Shaw's diary. If Klein combined the Book of Calamity with Rosel's Travels, these 2 closely related books would automatically merge, and some of Shaw's specific experiences would be presented in biographical form. But the wary cat suddenly stopped trying, even though it had been incredibly brave before. Very good. Fool, Klein nodded, slightly worried about the angel's possible requests. Mr. Angel has unusually offered his diary. Miss Justice, with her keener observation, realized that this was an intentional attempt by the angel to engage with them more, and she was quite pleased. Klein began reading the diary after receiving it. February 9th, today is Bonoa's birthday. I should be happy for him because my child is so outstanding, his character is so excellent, and he is so devout. Everyone is congratulating me, saying that Bonoa will become a Holy Spirit and become the next chosen one like me. Everyone thinks this is good, including Matilda and Charles, but I feel a little sad. I don't want my child to be so obedient. He should have his own hobbies and feelings, to go out and make a fuss, instead of treating himself as a believer in God and sticking to those dogmas. Haha, I still remember Zarathul's prophecy. My youngest son will be a lovely angel. Haha, what a lovely angel. Bonoa's sequence has caught up with me, and it looks like it will surpass me soon. Haha, what a terrible father I am. Divine favor. Favor towards my youngest child. Does this mean I'll have to compete with Bonoa for the title of angel next? Is this your way of guarding against me? Or keeping me in check? As a god, this kind of tactic makes me want to laugh. What, following in his father's footsteps, the student surpasses the master? Or perhaps one door with two angels? One door with two Holy Spirits? You don't actually think that letting Bonoa easily catch up with all my efforts over the years will discourage me, do you? You wouldn't understand my pride. What good are gods? Given time, I can take their place. Klein looked at the diary. Although Rosal repeatedly emphasized that he despised this despicable trick, the dissatisfaction in the words was almost overflowing. This was the beginning of the falling out between the Emperor and Steam Church. By this time, the Emperor should have become Archon, but the feeling of being overtaken by his youngest son in just a few years. The Emperor was still a little vulnerable, when the Prince of Wan was his youngest son, and when his youngest son was being praised by all the nobles, ministers, church colleagues, and family members. Klein even felt a bit empathetic, which directly lowered his impression of God of steam and machinery. Shah was speechless. He really wanted to know if he had told Steam Maiden that someone would help him digest the features of Sequence 1, that this person would have their own opportunities and there was no need to take too much care of them, but that their family could be given some support. Shah felt this was something he would do, and Steam Maiden executed it flawlessly. The Rosal father and son directly had two angels, and even two angels of the same era, directly occupying two Sequence 2 features of Steam Church, but Huang, the founder of Steam, seemed a little dissatisfied. Steam Maiden may not understand these complex emotions. On February 21st, I tried to contact Zarathul again, but to no avail. Ever since I got that Antigonus notebook, Zarathul has been appearing less and less frequently. I almost suspected that he was deliberately avoiding me. On February 22nd, I made a sealed artifact for Bernadette that suited her perfectly. Although I hate to admit it, Jacob really cared about Bernadette, and was even willing to give up such a precious feature as a gift to her. He did teach Bernadette a lot, such as how to disguise himself as a follower of Hidden Sage, safely steal knowledge and responses, and even if he was discovered, he could now use this mask to block out Hidden Sage's delirious ramblings. But that doesn't stop him from being a nasty guy. Damn it, Bernadette used to only look at me with that adoring gaze. I really want to get rid of him, but Bernadette is adamant. Damn it, she rarely argues with her father, but lately she's been doing it more and more, and she's getting better and better at it. Damn it, can't that wretched thief teach occultism properly instead of just teaching it properly? Klein's eyes flickered when he saw Jacob's name. If Jacob had been Bernadette's teacher, and if even the Emperor couldn't forcibly expel him, then he must be at least a demigod-level powerhouse. Bernadette might possess a potion recipe from a demigod or higher in Thief Pathway. Because of Amon's intimidation of Mr. Fool was far from sufficient. Before acquiring the Bizarro Sorcerer formula, Klein even had his eye on Thief Pathway. Wait a minute, Zarathul and Jacob seem to be on adjacent pathways. Klein recalled reading in the diary that Jacob seemed to have been interested in the Antigonus notebook, but he didn't get it. Could Zarathul's distance from the Emperor be related to Jacob? On October 5, several followers of Primordial Moon were captured. What they showed intrigued me, some of their power seemed to come directly from the Scarlet Moon. That's strange. A lot of data proves that the Red Moon is an asteroid. How can it have both physical and mysterious characteristics at the same time? If it has mystery, it means it contains spirituality. Could the Red Moon be a large-scale sealed artifact? With my current abilities, I could go to the moon, but it would be quite troublesome, so there's no need for it for now. The Great Emperor and the Three Great Families of Mystery. On October 7, I finally made up my mind. I plan to transfer my sequence to the adjacent, Mystery Prior, pathway so that I will have a chance to become Sequence 1. Quote, I have always suspected that Hidden Sage is a uniqueness of conceptual activation. It is because the Moses ascetic order prayed too much, and then some accident awakened its spirituality. So there is probably still room for Sequence 1 of this pathway. I've already obtained the potion recipe for Knowledge Emperor from that ancient organization. From now on, whenever I need the corresponding materials, whether they already belong to an angel, or have been combined with something to become a twisted monster or a dangerous uniqueness, I won't give them up. If I can become the Knowledge Emperor, I will be free from the influence of the higher gods. Bernadette will then have less to worry about the knowledge imparted by Hidden Sage, and the Gustower family will truly be worthy of being on par with the other royal families of the North Continent. If Mystery Prior, there's more than one vacant sequence 1 in pathway. I might even have a chance to become the King of Angels, or even take down Hidden Sage, becoming a true god on par with the god of steam and machinery. Such a future is much brighter than being confined to the space between the Church of Steam and Machinery and the Eternal Blazing Sun Church, as Amir Intis first archon. Your Majesty, are you speaking human language? Klein could somewhat understand the Emperor. After all, the Emperor felt that his achievements were somewhat overwhelming and that he was very dissatisfied with the god of steam and machinery. It seems the Emperor may have succeeded in the end, otherwise, he wouldn't have had the confidence to completely break with Steam Church and stand on the same side as Beyond. The deities at the top of the pathway have considerable control over the angels below them. Furthermore, some of the Emperor's views are quite insightful. The fact that the reader pathway cannot be interchanged with the mystery prior and savant pathways also indicates that the three pathways are fundamentally different. The reader pathway may symbolize the pursuit of knowledge and omniscience, while the latter two pathways symbolize different aspects of knowledge. If we have to put it that way, the reader pathway might actually outperform the mystery prior pathway and the savant pathway. Klein finished thinking and began reading the third page of the diary. However, this time the Emperor's handwriting was even more messy, with many repetitive and conflicting strokes in some places, making it a headache to read. No, impossible. I'm not the only one. I'm not the first one to come here. Ha ha ha, there's something wrong with my fate. My identity has been switched, and my reissued silver medal has been taken away. Quote, what do you mean, for my own good? You damn thief, you liar. His purpose is to use my identity to open that world filled with gray mist. That world is important. That world is important. What I see tells me that everything will be destroyed, including everything I have created. No, I cannot accept this ending. I must save myself. I can't believe their bullshit promises, and the seven gods are no better. Should I summon Mr. Door back to the real world? No, that won't do. That could bring unimaginable disaster. I must become Sequence Zero. Only by becoming a god can I dispel the fog before me and reclaim my lost name. These Chinese characters carry the madness that Sequence 1 inadvertently preserved when writing them. Klein's head was spinning when he read them. If this were in the real world, he might have gone insane and gone crazy on the spot. Klein, enduring a headache, sorted through the information in the diary. What could possibly make the magnanimous emperor, who dared to declare that he would replace the gods and laugh loudly, I don't care about the floods after I die, so out of control and so agitated? The emperor discovered that he was not the only, but the earliest, time traveler. After becoming a craftsman, the emperor replicated the mysterious silver plaque he bought before his time travel, saw a grayish-white mist, and then it seemed that Jacob had stolen the silver plaque. There's something wrong with this Jacob. Klein felt a chill run down his spine as he thought about this. The emperor's situation was far too dangerous. Judging from the contents of so many diaries, this Jacob was clearly an angel, otherwise, he wouldn't have been feared by Zeratul and the later emperor. The emperor's contact with Zeratul was too early. At that time, the emperor had just begun to make a name for himself in Steam Church, and Zeratul had already made contact with him, hoping that the emperor would help him steal the Antigonus family's notes from Steam Church in the future. Jacob may have started targeting the emperor a little later, but it should have been around this time as well. This gray fog space is clearly related to Seer Pathway, Thief Pathway, Apprentice. Regarding the pathway, the emperor hadn't even left the starting village when he ran into the sight of two angels. Klein thought about Will Osepton, the Snake of Fate, the angel of the Fate Pathway, and could see that he was somewhat special. That emperor. Klein's mind raced. Could this be considered a convergence? The great emperor, a demigod, had known Seer and Thief Pathway's angels before. Fortunately, the two angels didn't get along, so there was some balance between them. Moreover, the great emperor's spirit hadn't been worn down. On the contrary, it had become even more determined. What is your request? Klein put away his diary and looked at Mr. Angel, asking a question. Can I ask you to perform a major memory correction spell and change Jacob from appearing in your old diary to Zoroaster? Sha'ur hadn't realized it before, but now he understands. Using Jacob's surname during the Rosal era was a mistake. The correct way to proceed was to use Zoroaster, which would have allowed the great Black Emperor to once again have three Grand Dukes, Zeratul, Zoroaster, and Abraham. Fortunately, it's not too late to realize this now. Jacob and Zoroaster can be used interchangeably. After Rosal dies, he can still edit his diary however he wants to ensure there are no uncivilized comments. I want to know, Mr. Rosal, is it a coincidence that these diaries were left behind? Shah asked, seemingly seriously. As soon as the question was raised, Ms. Hermit looked over immediately. The other members of the Tarot Club also began to ponder. If it was not a coincidence that Emperor Rosal left these diaries, then he was trying to convey something to certain people. I don't think it's a coincidence. Mr. Fool smiled faintly, his tone very objective and neutral. Seeing that the angels had no further questions, he leaned back in his chair, looked around, and said, "You may begin." In the instant Fool finished speaking, he switched his account in the world chat and looked at Sun and Hanged Man, and said, "The notary potion recipe you want is available for trade at any time." However, World spoke first to prevent others from stealing his business. The group then exchanged some Beander materials as needed. Seeing that no one spoke up, Alger turned to Angel and asked, "Mr. Angel, do you have a way to get the Ocean Songster potion recipe?" "There is a way, but what will you offer in exchange?" "Greater than Orange Light, Hilarion." Shah looked at Alger, and he was very suspicious that because of his appearance, the overall quality of Tarot Club would decline, and the grand scene of all the angels in the original timeline might not be so easy to achieve. It's unlikely he would kill Boli Deloud, the president of the Psychology Alchemists, just because Miss Justice's life is inconvenient. The Sequence 5 to Sequence 3 traits that Alger obtained in the original timeline, which originated from elves, would not be given to Alger casually, even if Alger has some elven blood. Therefore, it seems that Mr. Fool's presence is still very important for the overall strength of Tarot Club. I know of a primitive island where some extinct supernatural creatures lived. Alger paused for a moment, then threw out his chips. Good. Shah agreed and told Alger the potion recipe. If Alger could find help to collect the Beander materials needed for advancement on that island, that would be his skill, and Shah wouldn't deliberately hinder him. This straightforwardness left Alger, who was already prepared, somewhat at a loss for words. This isn't how you negotiate a trade. I haven't even specified whether I'm exchanging coordinates for the recipe, or helping you hunt for some rare Beander material in exchange for the recipe. Alger opened his mouth, but then chose to keep it closed. Oh well, he should have gotten used to it by now. Catlia, Hermit, wasn't in a hurry to buy the blood of the mythical creature from the Tarot Club. She believed the Queen would definitely prepare it for her. Bernadette herself was an angel and didn't need to ask anyone else. At least, Shah thought so before a single drop of her blood was taken from her. Bernadette's reasoning was that Catlia would be even luckier with his blood. Shah was speechless. Hermit. Pathway only needs the blood of a demigod, that is, an incomplete mythical creature, to ascend to demigod status. However, when Bernadette was ascending, Shah deliberately tricked Lao Huang by using his own blood, and even had a way to make Sequence 5 Bernadette withstand the knowledge and divinity in the blood. When Bernadette taught her daughter, she copied this method exactly. Ordinary Sequence 5 Mystery Prior's analysis that angel blood can cause madness is even more absurd than a primary school student learning calculus on their own. How are you all doing now? Justice. Audrey asked Little Sun curiously. The City of Silver has begun to establish some exchanges with other surviving city-states, among which the more powerful one is called Moon City. The history of the City of Silver is also recorded. They were once followers of Lilith, the progenitor of Sanguine, but later converted to Christianity and were commanded by the Lord to guard the border of the East Continent. Little Sun explained honestly. Emlyn, who was next to him, frowned and muttered a few words of dissatisfaction. Is the land in your area ready for normal grain cultivation? Was the seed I helped collect useful? Miss Justice continued to inquire. Although the curse and pollution in most of the land have not been eliminated, we have prioritized the purification of some land. The seeds you sent are growing very well. Thank you for your help. Derek smiled happily. How could the City of Silver not have the potion recipe for the Earth Pathway? However, the Earth Pathway was inherently limited in the Forsaken Land of the Gods in the past. Now that it has finally turned around, the City of Silver will naturally train some planters to improve the food problem. I'm glad I could help you. Audrey was also pleased to be able to contribute to the development of the City of Silver. Mr. Fool listened to their conversation, glanced at Angel, who remained calm, appearing as if she had nothing to hide. The Tarot Club session passed by in casual conversation. Shah regained consciousness and flexed his wrist. Mr. Fool is also a master of playing dumb. This isn't just empty praise, playing a big shot for a long time does indeed bring out a certain charm in one's mannerisms. As long as the mask isn't torn off, one will always be standing from the perspective of someone in a superior position, considering overall issues. He put down his knife and fork and continued to enjoy his matcha cake. Rosel's greatest contribution to the world is probably all kinds of desserts, and the sugar content is normal. That night, Byam's broadcasting room was invaded by a rogue, and a series of repeated broadcasts broke the tranquility of the night. Hermoxic is at 32 Black Pepper Boulevard. Hermoxic is at 32 Black Pepper Boulevard. Rogue Emperor ran away after doing his bad deed. Shah-Ur, who had changed into her pajamas and was about to go to sleep, got up helplessly and said, "You can come in by yourself." As if hearing his voice, the main door opened automatically, a gust of evening breeze blew in, and a thin old man wearing a cotton-padded coat and a woolen overcoat looked at Shah-Ur with some excitement and said, "Your Majesty. I never thought I would see you at the end of my life." Shah-Ur rolled her eyes at Orange Light. 7 lights wouldn't die easily, this was just the end of the life of Orange Light's incarnation, Tulane von Hermoxic. "I accept your greetings. If you're going to die, die out there." Shah-Ur pointed to the hotel where Klein was staying, saying that since the noise was keeping him awake, then no one should sleep either. "Your Majesty, is that the young prince?" Orange Light looked towards where Klein was. At this moment, the Saphira Castle scent on Klein had not yet dissipated, making him look like a torch in the dark in 7 Light's eyes. "No, he's a replacement. You can also interpret this as the darling of the new era, a protagonist with potential." Shah-Ur explained, Orange Light, quite clearly. Orange Light was heartbroken upon hearing this. "Your Majesty, the holy throne above the spirit world is vacant. The old ministers are all planning to serve the Emperor again, why doesn't your Majesty ascend the throne?" The orange face scrunched up like a chrysanthemum, longing for some candy to relieve stress but also needing to be mindful of etiquette and appearance. "Hilarion, sit down and relax." Shah-Ur gestured for Orange Light, Hilarion to sit down. He casually made a few gestures in the air, and time in the entire biome became disordered. The Lowen colony garrison outside the villa, alerted by the broadcast, the members of the Rose School of Thought, and the MI9 personnel all seemed to slow down tenfold. "I can alter the flow of time inside the villa, but I have a more troublesome impact on the timeline of the entire biome." Shah-Ur popped a brown candy into her mouth. It was something she'd taken from Orange Light, and it tasted pretty good. "That's because neither method is considered troublesome for His Majesty." Orange Light was delighted to share his candy with the White Emperor, and he ate one as well, then complimented him. In his view, Spirit World, the Lord of the Spirit World, recognized by all 7 lights, is virtually unstoppable in this era. Returning to the holy position is a matter of course. Greater than. Hermit's question. For you, returning to the holy position is a matter of course. Although, Orange Light, Hilarion relaxed a bit, his eyes still held respect and humility. "Yes, that's right. The obstacles I'll encounter will probably not outweigh the support I can get. It's right there, above Spirit World, and the Great Door has long been open to me." Shah-Ur knew perfectly well that getting to the Lord of the Mysteries was easy. A certain teacher had already cleared the path to the mysteries for his beloved cat, so picking the peaches was a piece of cake. But what's the use? I became the Lord of the Mysteries, and then I brought my close friends to high positions one by one. While I was tearing each other apart with the Celestial, we were also tacitly keeping our feet on the pathway of all 5 families to prevent God Almighty from being resurrected. Earth might be safe now. No matter how many outer deities are outside, they're no match for the Lord of the Mysteries who wield the river of eternal darkness as a sword. And then what? What am I supposed to do next? Continue to allocate Saphira and properties on Earth according to their relationship to each other. I need to convince the Celestial that we're on the same page, because Mysteries has such a terrible reputation. If we fail, it will be utter ruin, and no one will give Mysteries a second chance. I also need to wait for the other outer deities to grow, and with their help, occupy 60% of my brain capacity while struggling with the Celestial's consciousness. I won't let the Celestial feel that life is meaningless and drag me to see God Almighty, nor will I let the Celestial gain the upper hand and chop my consciousness into mincemeat. Shah-Ur seemed to be stating something very ordinary, but Orange Light, Hilarion's entire back was completely soaked. He wanted to slap himself for being so talkative and listening to things he shouldn't have. Orange Light felt like he was about to die. "It's boring. You know what? I think sacrificing myself for a moment of glory is much more interesting than what you're talking about, like returning to the throne and taking control of Spirit World again. If I were a god, I shouldn't be so limited. If I were a human, I shouldn't be so presumptuous. When you set aside your prejudices and re-examine the universe, aren't all those grudges ridiculous? If I want to be a human being, I will be a good human being. If I want to be a god, I will strive to become a god. Human beings have 2 desires. First, to survive, and second, to survive well. Gods are born from two sources, heaven and earth, and they create the universe. I want to ask you, Hilarion, my wise one, how will you teach me? Sha'ur turned to look at Orange Light, her bright eyes filled with curiosity and exploration. Orange Light trembled as it was looked at by those eyes, as it was a spirit world that had existed for countless eons. 7 lights is a synonym for knowledge and wisdom, no matter where it is. In spirit world, it is a symbol of a part of mystical knowledge, and on Earth, it represents the most outstanding scientists, mathematicians, and mechanics. But now, faced with Sha'ur's sincere request for advice and inquiry, Orange Light suddenly slid off the chair and onto the floor. He died. Hermoxic's human body couldn't withstand the pressure and died of fright. Oh, Sha'ur was somewhat disappointed. He looked at the corpse on the ground and said, "Go to where you deserve to die. Don't die in my place. Keep the candy in your pocket. It's never good to waste it. I can trade with you." As Sha'ur finished speaking, the corpse on the ground got up. The spirit of Orange Light manipulated the dead body to stand up. He smiled somewhat sheepishly, bent down and offered all the candies on his body, then bowed again and turned to retreat outside. "For you." Sha'ur glanced at the candy on the table, and the space around him distorted slightly. A set of spirit world information transformed into spiritual candy with the same flavor, more suitable for spirit world creatures to consume. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Orange Light quickly collected the candies, thanked them, and then dragged his body away, preparing to die as instructed. Sha'ur ignored him and picked up a book about the Renaissance period from the table to continue reading. In a world with multiple churches, the representation of the church in works during the Renaissance period also carried many symbolic meanings. However, rather than portraying the church as backward and negative, they were more inclined to interpret its doctrines. Even if they don't dare to openly seize the right to interpret the scriptures of the major churches, they still use various slightly exaggerated methods and different art forms to highlight the ideas that they approve of and that can be derived from the scriptures. The core message remains that God loves the world, the difference lies in the way he expresses that love. With Orange Light gone, Byam's time flow returned to normal. Meanwhile, Rogue Emperor had just returned from Byam's broadcasting station, his spirit returned from gray fog space, and Klein re-logged back online in the baptismal chamber. That works. By muddying the waters, even if the Rose School of Thought has powerful figures in Byam, they certainly won't dare to make a move. In the end, no matter which faction Lowen wins the case and rescues this great scientist, they will eventually have to hand him over to the state due to public opinion. I've done a great thing. Klein went back to sleep with peace of mind, letting all the conspirators suffer from insomnia. Knock knock knock. The knocking on the door happened just as he was asleep. Are they making rounds? Is Lowen so dedicated to his post in Byam at night? Klein put on his coat and walked to the door. His spirit automatically knew that the guest outside the door was Hermoxic. Holy crap, why would he come looking for me? This is a bit creepy. Klein's initial sleepiness was completely gone. Open door. Who are you looking for? I'm John Yord now. Klein, now in a different identity, really wants to kick him out. I noticed you at the bar, but I didn't have a chance to talk to you then. Now that my life is coming to an end, I've been thinking about many things. Let me introduce myself, Orange Light, said Hilarion. One of the 7 lights. What brings you here? Wait, another one who can tell I'm special. Didn't I spend time dispersing the smell of the gray fog? Klein tried her best to maintain a polite smile. Once you advance to demigod status, your special abilities will no longer be easily noticed. Orange Light, Hilarion said with a chuckle. What do you want? Klein was already a bit numb, whose golden touch was so unreliable. I'm here to warn you, be careful of the mother tree of desire. Especially at night. Orange Light noticed that Klein was no longer sleepy and knew that its mission was accomplished, so it bid farewell, saying, all right, I should go now. I will die here and return to spirit world. Do you have any enemies here? Orange Light thought to herself, after all, he's someone His Majesty favors. It's never wrong to build a relationship with him beforehand. What's the meaning? Klein didn't understand. I can go to his doorway, die quietly, and then he'll be in trouble. Orange Light coughed lightly. He also had to take care of his own affairs after death. After these people finished their investigation, he would have to come back and collect his own body. Crushing. I need to be careful of Mother Tree of Desire. Oh no, Klein is completely unable to sleep now. Orange Light's words are quite clear. His special qualities can be discovered if one has fate-related abilities or a high enough and unique status. Does the orange light warning indicate that danger is imminent? Klein was a little scared, so he started calling for backup. He summoned Miss Messenger, and Rini Tinakel appeared, her blood-red eyes staring unblinkingly at Klein, which was quite frightening. "Could I ask you for help if I'm in danger?" Rini Tinakel did not refuse, and Klein agreed to pay 10,000 gold coins in installments, but without interest, which was somewhat less wicked. He wrote another letter to Ojik, writing quickly and beginning with, "Dear Mr. Ojik." After finishing all of this, Klein made himself a cup of coffee, sat in his bedroom on the second floor, and looked out the window. As soon as it was light, he put on his coat and got up to go out the door. In Byam, his closest friend is Mr. Angel. He hopes Mr. Angel is still alive, since Mr. Angel's demonstrated strength is enough to not be afraid of ordinary demigods. If not, borrowing the sealed artifact to teleport away from Byam would be a good thing. And so, Klein, who hadn't slept all night, didn't even eat breakfast. He stuffed a slice of ham between 2 slices of bread and left door early. He didn't see the threatening telegram sent by the telegraph machine that night, as Klein was always by the second floor window, ready to escape from the roof. Senor, the blood pirate general, who also came early in the morning to catch someone, missed him. He didn't expect that this little rat was even faster than him, who hadn't slept all night. However, Senor was not in a hurry, as Elder Jakes had given instructions last night. If the opponent is weak and has no backing, then take direct action. If the other party has powerful backers and strong allies, then keep them under surveillance and wait for Lady Saphira to arrive before taking action. It's all the same. Senor doesn't think there's anything that Lord Saphira can't handle. It's just a little mouse, he's confident he can hunt it all by himself. You mean you were the one who broadcast that last night? Sha'ur looked at Klein's white pirate secret puppet with a strange expression. What did Mother Tree of Desire do to you? Even if you let him complete the ceremony, he still can't get in. Rose School of Thought is just trying to boost KPIs, they don't have the ability to operate in Lowen Kingdom's important maritime colony. I've discovered the Rose School of Thought's conspiracy, but I've also been discovered by the Rose School of Thought, and may even be being targeted by the Mother Tree of Desire. Could I borrow your sealed artifact to send me directly out of Byam? I will pay. Klein remembered that instead of directly calling door, he temporarily switched to a secret puppet on door to seek help. Are you sure? Sha'ur returned to her room, carefully took out a gold stand, and unfurled part of the scroll on it. A chilling aura of death permeated the room. Stop, stop. When Sha'ur tried to elaborate further, Klein quickly intervened. He was a temporary puppet, and in the face of this eerie painting, he was losing control and becoming its slave. How does this painting relate to Tingnan? Is Nighthawk's sealed artifact, Door of Death, somewhat similar? As you can see, this sealed artifact has been used by me all over the place, and it's gotten a bit stained. If you're a Beander of the Sun Pathway, or if you have a sealed artifact of the Sun Pathway, that's fine. If not, a mystical item that makes you lucky can at least give you a chance to avoid being teleported to the underworld or other dangerous places. Sha'ur looked like he was in a difficult position. After all, he felt that they should learn from the darkness and let the animals roam freely. Boys should be toughened up more, they'll become stronger by struggling through troubles. I see. Klein wasn't too disappointed. He had a second plan. Using the spirit-controlling spell created by the Scepter of Life, combined with the marionettist's own spirit threads, he could control a relatively large sea monster, leave Byam by water, and then find a ship on another island to return to Backland. Here's what I'll do, I'll lend it to you for a bit. You can deploy it if you encounter danger, but don't point it at yourself. If you can't hold on to it, you can throw it away. It's cursing me, and it will come back to me on its own. Sha'ur handed, Scroll of the Gods, to Klein, adding a note as he did so. Klein's outstretched hand paused, but he still managed to touch the picture frame. If Mr. Angel hadn't been a decent person, he would have suspected that this was a curse transferred through transmission. Oh, by the way, carrying it around will give you nightmares at night. Don't try to put it in another space if you don't want your space equipment to break. Sha'ur stretched and looked relaxed, which made Klein feel even more cheated. Then I'll be going now. Also, I don't have any mystical items of the spatial type at all. Klein, who has seen a lot of strange things, still manipulated the secret puppet to carry away the metal picture frame. After Sha'ur's white secret puppet appeared on the door, he snapped his fingers, and the mirror began to ripple. Klein, who was avoiding the crowd, walked towards the cliff on the mountain, and his secret puppet, who was helping him carry his bag, appeared on the mirror. The bamboo forest rustled as, Blood Pirate General, Senor's attack was incredibly fierce. A dense barrage of ice arrows, green flames, and a strange net formed from various flying rocks and vegetation directly annihilated Klein's secret puppet. Klein, who escaped death thanks to the paper doll, felt the loss of his limbs and, without thinking, started playing his harmonica while holding the picture frame. Miss Messenger emerged from the void, freeing Klein from the near strangulation of his own clothes. Reinette Tinacare turned her head in a certain direction, snorted coldly, and invisible ripples spread out. On a large tree 100 meters away, an old man with thinning hair and deep features appeared. Unable to maintain his invisibility, he was pressed to the ground by an invisible boulder. When he saw Reinette Tinacare, fear flashed in his eyes. He was especially surprised that he had been pinned to the ground so easily. Even if she hadn't completely perished, shouldn't she have been seriously injured? Sequence 3 inches Disciple of Silence. Jakes was completely bewildered, truly bewildered. His head seemed to detach from his body like a balloon, his mouth was wide open, and his eyes held an expression of disbelief. Although Miss Messenger is still in her mythical form, her injuries have long been healed by Shah-ur. She is now in the Sequence 2 tier and could easily kill a saint from the same pathway. With just a breath, Jake's death was inevitable. The Blood Pirate General on the other side didn't even have a chance to react before being twisted into a pretzel. Klein, watching from the side, felt a chill run down his spine. Freebie. This is far too violent. Open black lens bracket at this point. I hope readers will remember our domain name. The top choice for reading Taiwanese novels, enjoy anytime, close black lens bracket. Klein felt a sense of dread as he looked at the Blood Pirate General, who resembled a twisted rope. The key point is that this person was congealed into a twisted shape, yet there was no blood splattering or limbs breaking. He maintained the most basic physiological structure like a rubber man. Before Klein could even react in surprise, Blood Pirate General unfolded again like a rolled-up carpet, then inflated back up as if it were being inflated. It is still usable, Reinette Tinacare said. He meant that the secret puppet is still usable and can be cleaned up, while the wraith can transform without any problems. Klein's lips twitched, but he still turned the still-alive wraith on the ground into a secret puppet. Even after being tortured, Blood Pirate General was still alive, but he had been artificially turned into a zombie and now transformed into a secret puppet. Reinette Tinacare flew to Jakes's body and picked up a small figure wrapped in bandages from the corpse's hand, which was emitting grayish-white mist. Just as he was about to destroy the cursed little man, a shrill scream rang out. Reinette released the little man, and a hand dripping with viscous pus emerged from the depths of Spirit World, grabbing the cursed little man. Walk. With a wave of her hand, Reinette Tinacare sent Klein's body floating up, directly towards the rock wall behind him. Saphira showed no sign of letting Klein go. The viscous liquid dripping from her sleeve transformed into zombies, vengeful spirits, and werewolf, which rushed towards Klein. Although most of them died from Reinette's curse, quite a few still managed to break through the defenses. The most deadly of them all was the little cursed figure that spewed grayish-white mist. With Saphira's power, it vanished and was about to curse Klein's fate. Renee blew a breath from one of her heads, and the cold wind brought the invisible curse back to life, but she was quickly entangled by Saphira again, turning into a shadow and fighting Saphira in the mists of history. Even someone as strong as Miss Messenger can meet a worthy opponent. Klein had a bad feeling. He didn't just sit and wait to die. He took out his iron cigarette case and threw the copper whistle inside, which was stained with ash, to the curse that was chasing after the ash. Snap! The gray mist on the bronze whistle was completely absorbed, and the entire whistle shattered. Somewhere in the underworld, a monster covered in white feathers let out a scream. It's cursed. After being attacked, the monster's confused mind caused it to retaliate. The cursed figure, affected by the power of death, became illusory and gradually faded away. Klein breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that it worked, and put the mystical item, which was contaminated by True Creator, back into his pocket. It seemed he wouldn't need it anymore. This was something he prepared specifically. According to intelligence, the True Creator and other evil gods also disliked the Mother Tree of Desire. Klein was about to run away when the undead creature that had been tricked burst out of the underworld and was hit by a brass picture frame as soon as it poked its head out. It angrily tried to tear the brass frame apart, but failed. Provoked, the brass frame opened halfway, and a semi-transparent hook pulled the feathered undead creature into the painting. Then another hook reached for Klein, as if it could pull out a person's soul. Finally, Ajik arrived late and knocked the hook away. His spirit swayed for a moment, then grabbed Klein's shoulder without hesitation and disappeared. The spirit world was like a scribbled oil painting. Klein felt a dizzying sensation and found himself on another island. He looked at the man who had released him and thanked him, Mr. Ajik. Ajik waved his hand, then shook his head. He felt a throbbing pain in his head, as if he had been caught by a hook in the painting. Where did you encounter such a dangerous thing? Ajik didn't believe it belonged to Klein. The fact that it could make him, a high-sequence death pathway cultivator, sense the risk of his spirit leaving his body meant it was at least a zero-level sealed artifact. It was so dangerous that even Ajik didn't dare pick it up. I borrowed it from a friend. Klein was a little embarrassed. Mr. Angel meant to throw it if there was danger, right? And his throwing posture was pretty standard, wasn't it? Buy him. Sha'ur picked up the scroll of the gods that had fallen to the ground. He realized that he hadn't given Mr. Fool enough stimulation, and many of the dangers weren't very dangerous. He thought, why don't I release Aemon? This was the first time he seriously considered whether to bring Mr. Door back to life, not just as a simple rescue, but as a helping hand. Whoosh! A dense barrage of lightning struck down from the sky, but Sha'ur didn't look up. A hurricane swept away all the lightning. Storm Churches, Sea King, glanced over and spotted Sha'ur lingering at the crime scene. It was uncertain at first, but now that, Sea God, Kavatua is protecting it, it must be heresy. Sha'ur completely ignored Storm Churches, Sea King, and Kavatua would never allow this despicable human to harm his noble master. He stood on the edge of the cliff, the sea breeze blowing, and with his psychological invisibility activated, everyone ignored him until Rinette Tinakal returned. Sha'ur glanced at her, looks like you didn't lose out. Saphira was not actually a physical manifestation of herself. Moreover, Rinette also took back her hands and other body parts, and Sha'ur didn't even notice when she started doing so. Miss Messenger regained her powers and immediately began retrieving her body parts, and there seemed to be no problem with her. Saphira, in fear, you. Renee's four heads spoke in turn. This is a good thing. Sha'ur opened the scroll of the gods, indicating that Rinette should infuse the aura of Saphira that she had captured onto the scroll. Rinette exhaled. The content of the oil painting changed, revealing a sinister-looking, eerie green abomination, Saphira. He looked at Sha'ur through the painting with fear, almost summoning the bound god at any moment. However, Sha'ur didn't make him waste his time. He grabbed the scroll and stole a heart, after which the scroll returned to its brass frame. Sha'ur tossed her heart to Rinette, and then her figure vanished, merging into a darkness. Rinette Tinakar clutched her heart in her hands, tucked it back into her chest, glanced in the direction Sha'ur had left, lowered her head slightly, and returned to the castle in spirit world. Deep dark heaven. When this tranquil divine dreamland began to ripple, Evernight Goddess, veiled in a thin veil and adorned in an elaborate gown studded with starlight, stood in a field filled with moonflowers and night-blooming jasmine. Sha'ur emerged from the dream and casually tossed a book with an illusory feathered serpent floating on its surface to Evernight Goddess. Ammonizes caught the book, a faint smile appearing beneath her veil. Greater than mainstream consciousness. The uniqueness of the death god. It was very simple, it was just tossed out like a bottle of Gatorade tossed aside. Would you like some black tea? Evernight Goddess took the initiative to invite him, saying, I can't help it, Sha'ur has given me too much. Ammonizes had initially thought he would have to put in more effort to achieve the death god uniqueness. However, since it was obtained too easily, he felt it was better to develop according to plan and then exchange it from Sha'ur. For the former Nordic executive, a long-term and stable exchange of interests was the most reassuring relationship. Good. Sha'ur didn't refuse. His patience was both good and bad. He couldn't stand the petty dragging on, but he was willing to sit down and talk instead of putting the scythe to Evernight Goddess's neck first, even though he had actually been holding that scythe in his hand the whole time. In the center of the kingdom of God, amidst a cluster of stars, the classic tea party of Evernight Goddess, often seen in the later stages of the multiverse, this woman always seems to live a good life, except in a very few works, since she never gets in the way of any important person. Even in the story of Aurora Order, the reason Evernight Goddess died was largely because his fellow countrymen took a fancy to the River of Eternal Darkness's branch. Otherwise, Evernight Goddess would most likely not have been killed. This kind of survival wisdom, important yet not dazzling, like the night, profound and powerful yet not aggressive, is worth learning. However, now that it has enough advantages, Sha'ur should be like the bright moon and the shining sun, not the darkness, even if it abandons the royal road. Vey settled the matter of keeping the quill of Alzuhad for me. This is something Sha'ur can't avoid. It's a pity that he didn't start with angels. But the most crucial thing is that he was able to quickly master angelic combat power in the 5th epic. He was able to undergo psychological treatment and become a non-extreme, non-mad spectator, which played a very important role in his overall development. What else do you need? Evernight Goddess poured tea for Sha'ur. She didn't think Sha'ur was being so decisive today because of this matter, otherwise, he would have already handed over Death God uniqueness to her, instead of doing so abruptly. If you want to control her, it would be better to delay a little longer, about half a year later. By then, even if she gains Death God's uniqueness, there won't be enough time to master it. Instead, it will become a heavy burden, and she will have to rely on Sha'ur's help even more. I just feel like I'm doing too much. You put a lot of effort into the 3 great families of mystery, and I did just as much. Logically speaking, now that I've handed over Death God uniqueness to you, there should be almost no problem for me to become the next Lord of the Mysteries. The entire Fool pathway, the Path of Error, and the Door pathway can all be connected to us. But I don't want to become the so-called Lord of the Mysteries right now. I don't want to get entangled with the consciousness of the celestial being, and ultimately choose to slumber in this era. I still have many things I want to do. This period of time is more valuable to me than any other year to come. My story should not end here. Shah stated frankly. He is a bit special. Regardless of what the future holds, the 5th epoch, the period since the founding of the Tarot Club, is the most valuable to him. The sense of familiarity it brings him is unparalleled by any other era. Becoming the Lord of the Mysteries, whatever he gains, is another matter, but what he may lose is reality. He didn't really want to ascend to become a celestial venerable, so he wanted to stay in the mortal realm for the time being. Evernight Goddess didn't offer any comment. After all, she couldn't quite understand Shah-Ur's mentality. In her opinion, there was nothing wrong with securing victory early, but she wasn't opposed to the other party's somewhat unusual mentality. After all, after thousands of years of watching from the sidelines, this woman had long since become an old lady who liked to eat sunflower seeds, meaning there was no one to chat with about everyday things. Moreover, Shah is currently occupying spectator. Sequence 1, who knows what his real purpose is. I have always paid close attention to Mr. Fool, from the very beginning to now. But the biggest difference between you and me is that you hope to create a Lord of the Mysteries who is closer to you. But I don't need it. But I can't raise them like you do, and I can't be a nanny forever. Shah still considered Klein a friend, and it wouldn't do to see him being bullied. However, she also didn't want to feed him all the way to the Lord of the Mysteries, forcing the clueless Mr. Fool to eventually become a god. That would be idiotic. Therefore, I will give you the uniqueness of the Death God today. I can also tell you frankly, the Lord of the Mysteries is not my first choice. I want to gain more experience, including understanding the world, the development of all things, the natural cycle of life, and the joys and sorrows of human life. The world always needs to provide me with new stories and new books to read. This saves me a lot of trouble and makes me happy. As an author, I am able to write and create stories and books, but I also hope to see what wills outside of my own can bring about. So, I won't block you. If one day I want to try what it feels like to be sun, please let me hug you. Shah spoke with a hint of curiosity in her voice. In those rites of godhood, during the process of self-transformation and sublimation, the spiritual perception of the world is far more sensitive than in daily life. Sequence 0. What were the experiences and feelings of Sun's ascension ritual, taking the potion in the darkness where all things return or in the all-encompassing color of the chaos sea? Open your eyes from darkness, and let your light shine from chaos. His primary expectation now is not the strength of power. In terms of supreme authority and the source of all things, no being can surpass the original creator. At least until the cycle of each era is completed, he is more interested in the experience than in accumulating wealth. Evernight Goddess was slightly taken aback. After all, he was still thinking about how to repay Shah for this gift, how to bring down the god of combat, and how to use the resources at hand to support his allies and eliminate potential threats. She had too many things to consider: the Aben branch stream in the underworld, the outer deities beyond Earth, the ascetics on the western continent, and the turmoil on the north and south continents. As for Shah, the other party directly brought up the Death God uniqueness, stating that their reason was simply, I don't want to block you anymore. This mentality, if I might still choose to give you the uniqueness of the Death God for various reasons in the future, why shouldn't I just give it to you directly? I don't want to hold you back anymore, so I'll just give it to you, made Ammonizes feel subtle. It's hard to say whether this means divinity or humanity is dominant. Night and death. This doesn't really align with Evernight Goddess's wishes. Because this kind of acquisition is the least secure, it makes her feel much more at ease than acquiring it through planning an exchange of benefits. After all, today, Shah might give Death God uniqueness to her because she thinks it's more useful for me to have it than for you to have it. The day after tomorrow, she might say it's a waste for you to have it and give it to me instead, thus becoming her enemy without any burden. This kind of situation is entirely subjective, predictable yet unpredictable, and it's the most troublesome. Ammonizes was certain that if it weren't for her familiarity with Shah, and the fact that in Shah's eyes, no one in the north and south continents was more deserving of such a gift, then this Death God uniqueness would have been easily obtained by others as well. Even so, her deep eyes beneath the veil remained calm. She rose and walked to Shah's side, performed a standard curtsy, and said in a very ordinary tone, "Then why not now?" Shah nodded and accepted the invitation. An embrace that is related to, yet unrelated to, realistic stances, practical interests, and individual emotions. This is a kind of greeting between old days remnants. You're still alive, and I'm not dead either. Shah hugged Evernight Goddess. The physical sensations were indescribable, but the spiritual feeling was that she was being grabbed by a ferocious demonic wolf with 6 arms. Even though Evernight Goddess did not show any malice, she could not ignore the danger she posed. Shah released one hand, not looking at Evernight Goddess's normal female arm, turned to the side and shook hands with one of Evernight Goddess's wolf paws, rubbing the short, stiff wolf fur on her palm, and pinching her dark claws, briefly testing the texture, elasticity, and sharpness of these fingertips. Having satisfied his curiosity, he released Evernight Goddess and sat back down in his chair. Evernight Goddess didn't seem to mind. After all, Shah hadn't grabbed her hair, which was already quite polite. This time, she placed the Book of Death she was holding on the table, pushed it forward, placing it directly between the two of them, and then asked, "I can sense a powerful spirit within it that resonates with uniqueness." Shah nodded and said, "I didn't remove the virtual personality I cultivated for you when I gave it to you, otherwise it would have been troublesome for me to have uniqueness. You can handle it yourself. Can I control this spirit?" Evernight Goddess asked directly. After all, she had the authority of a spirit, and at present, rather than controlling it herself, it was better to influence the spirit inside the Death God uniqueness through her authority and indirectly control the Death God uniqueness. The only problem to be careful about was that this might lead to being betrayed at a crucial moment, since this was Shah-Ur's spirit. But for now, Evernight Goddess has no such worries. It's not a time of turmoil yet. As a conspirer, she knows very well that such backstabbing usually happens during fierce battles, not now when there is no fighting and internal chaos. Shah nodded indifferently. Anyway, if his spirit was unhappy, it would just explode against Evernight Goddess on its own. He didn't care whether he agreed or not. If you have nothing else to say, how about we talk about Death God uniqueness? With a wave of his hand, Evernight Goddess established a connection with the spirit within the uniqueness of the Death God through the authority of his spiritual body. He opened the Book of Death spiritually without abruptly disturbing the illusory feathered serpent sleeping on the surface of the book. Okay, let's give each other a high five first. Shah tapped the table with his finger, and a dreamlike state, blurring the lines between reality and dream, enveloped the round table in front of him. Instead of suppressing this power within his own divine realm, Evernight Goddess high-fived Shah, using his authority to support this real dream as well. Under the watchful gaze of the Evernight Goddess, as the dream took shape, Shah-Ur's pale golden eyes turned white. He sat there, like death itself, and in his spiritual perception, what lay before him was no longer a dragon, but a phoenix with mysterious wings. At this moment, neither of them made any move, but it was obvious who Death God uniqueness favored more, as laid out on the table. Even if Evernight Goddess was the true god of the adjacent pathway, she still couldn't compare to Death sitting opposite her. Stunning. Ammonizes clapped softly, unable to help but admire him. Even at such close range, he, as a true god, could not defeat Sequence 1 before him. This is just in a dream. Shah knew how weak his death was, meaning that death position was vacant. Visionary, the mind dragons of Pathway can transform into any mythical creature, their outward appearance changing at will according to their inner thoughts. If the other party believes it to be real, then Phoenix is the true Phoenix of Death Pathway. While those at the level of true gods and angels are unlikely to be easily deceived into helping the mind dragons refresh their status, in the dream realm, specifically the dragon of imagination, there's no need to consider whether the enemy imagines it, existence itself is reality. The existence of the spiritual dragon, who possesses sufficient knowledge of mysticism, is real enough that it can be transformed into a real illusion only if the other party believes in it. This dream now possesses not only Shah-Ur's power but also the authority of the Evernight Goddess. It is a god-level dream. In a god-level dream, Shah-Ur, through her own accumulation, can conjure up her own imagination and transform into death within the dream. Open black lens bracket now, we can talk. Close black lens bracket. There is no need to speak. Spiritual communication is simpler and more direct than language. The illusory Book of Death appeared, its pages flipping rapidly. The coiled feathered serpent on its surface awoke, beginning to reveal the various powers and abilities of the Death Pathway. This is essentially a performance. The Night Pathway, being an adjacent pathway to the Death Pathway, intersects with the Death Pathway in various authority aspects. When Evernight Goddess also joined in, the singular interpretation of death became a discourse. Shah-Ur's status at Evernight Church was automatically updated to Hanged Man. The demigod of pathway. How he was promoted is unimportant. Even if Archbishop Anthony of St. Samuel Cathedral found out, he wouldn't ask. At most, he would just become more taciturn after discovering Leonard's old man persona. The highest level of dream can overshadow reality, but the most unique aspect of dreams is the interweaving of illusion and reality. During this afternoon tea, the two chattering people would occasionally switch places. Shah was able to sense darkness's authority and power, as well as 6 arms that she could manipulate flexibly, after blinking. Amonizes was also able to see the Evernight goddess sitting opposite her and feel the warmth emanating from the god of death. This divine dream was ultimately woven by the combined forces of both sides, serving as a jointly constructed platform that could open up a portion of authority. Helping others. 4th epic. Jacob finally understood that a truly outstanding marauder should make many friends. Only by borrowing and repaying can one borrow again without difficulty. Thieves don't want to accumulate wealth. He then assumed different identities, appearing in various places throughout the Tudor, Truncest Empire, pursuing outstanding ladies and admiring talented gentlemen. When Antigonus returned home after his hunt, Jacob and Philoneas leisurely dressed. As a mythical creature with more wolf traits, the mother of the sky, the ruler of the night, this daughter of the demonic wolf possessed a stronger animalistic nature and a purer view of the world, living a more fulfilling life. Jacob's pastime was quite simple. After all, she was just idling around anyway. Antigonus didn't even react much, only showing slight wariness of Jacob's presence. Don't be nervous. Strictly speaking, we were all once vassals of the White Emperor. You may not believe it, but our emperor is not someone who likes to waste or leave resources idle. Although the Solomon Empire is a thing of the past, Jacob, or rather Shah, took out the mask hanging on Saphira Castle. If he was going to give it, he would give the real one. He can take it back and hang it up again when he needs it. Greed and wariness flashed in Antigonus's eyes. The handsome wolf cub looked at his lost mask, his heart filled with joy at having it back. In the original timeline, he even dared to accept the help of the brothers Adam and Ammon, asking them to cooperate in completing the ritual of containing uniqueness. If Antigonus dared to trust even Ammon and Adam, how could he not trust his old boss? The recent ascension of the god of new knowledge and wisdom, and the still unknown hermit, along with Paragon's high sequence characteristics across 2 paths, surely indicate that the former boss is aiming for the knowledge-based second path. The chances of Jacob being a competitor are slim. It's pointless for a former boss to try and sabotage him for a sequence 1 feature. Don't underestimate the magnanimity of the dual pathway god. So Antigonus bowed down in reverence, and Philoneas rubbed against Jacob's arm. They selectively trusted Marauder. What else could Shah say? He guaranteed you'd survive until after the War of the 4 Emperors, the rest, shouldn't you work hard for yourselves? If he goes offline, I'll go offline too, there's nothing I can do about it. Now, let's talk about the issue of accommodating the uniqueness of foodies. The Beander ritual is simple: full-time, fate, or history once. The simplified ritual is even simpler. I steal your identity, destiny, traits, and uniqueness. After I succeed, or rather, after I begin, I will return the process of containing uniqueness, as well as your identity, destiny, and traits, to you by manipulating the flow of time and creating delays. So it becomes that at the same time, I am the one who successfully accommodates uniqueness, but you are the one who accommodates uniqueness. It's just a simple ritual, no need to be so serious, just swipe it casually. Shah-Ur's explanation was quite simple, but Antigonus in front of him couldn't help but reveal his wolf tail, which twitched uneasily. Everything else is fine, but even the ability to steal traits makes demonic wolf feel very insecure. Stealing your traits is to put your mind at ease. Stealing an extra trait would be a complete burden for me. I don't have the time or ability to deal with the remaining promotion marks in your traits while bearing your identity and fate. It's also to make it easier for you to take on uniqueness in one step. Shah-Ur casually patted Philoneas's head, the meaning of which was very clear. Instead of worrying about me, why aren't you worried that your sister killed both of us at the same time when we were at our weakest? Philoneas remained quiet, knowing that Antigonus must be conflicted, but might not be able to resist the temptation. The deification ritual of the 3 great families of mystery ultimately required the cooperation of others, whether they were on the side of justice or opposition. Can I invite someone to watch? Antigonus hesitated for a moment before speaking. Sure. Shah-Ur raised an eyebrow. What kind of friends could this guy possibly have? The 3 then moved to another location, with Ms. Tudor, one of the archons of the United Empire, acting as the supervisor. Antigonus used to operate within the White Emperor's sphere of influence, so he naturally came into contact with the ambitious Ms. Tudor, whom he had already begun to befriend and win over. At that time, Tudor's role was that of an archon responsible for handling political affairs for the White Emperor. I will do my best to ensure your safety. Alistair Tudor certainly wouldn't pass up this opportunity to make its presence felt on both sides. It is also necessary to win over more allies. Although the United Empire has not been established for long, some problems have already emerged. The most typical problem is that some gods seem to be more inclined to truncest. This might be because Trunsoist is male, or because he has a stain of serving the White Emperor, or perhaps he approved of the development of the new sect of knowledge and wisdom in the United Empire. Although everything seemed normal on the surface, Alice Tower's personality was such that she was always prepared. Moreover, why wouldn't he accept a new god of knowledge and wisdom? Given their past relationship, and the fact that she was a goddess, it would be strange if he didn't go along with it. Then let's get started. First beyond ability, then identity, then destiny, then characteristics, and finally uniqueness. Shah passed the food's uniqueness to Alistair Tudor, explained the process to Antigonus, and began to steal it. This is similar to playing with building blocks. Marauder's theft also requires skill. Quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes, making it easier as you progress. Mr. Fool's actions in the original timeline can only be attributed to his lack of experience with Marauder, insufficient foundation, and lack of luck. With the blessing of the Buddha, it's impossible to know how many times it will fail before finally succeeding. Antigonus did not resist, feeling first some basic Beander abilities being stolen from his body, then the core abilities that these basic abilities had evolved into, and finally his authority, traits, identity, and destiny. He peeled back the layers, stealing away everything. Shah easily stitched these stolen, disparate elements together using his stolen grafting ability, reorganizing them into the three elements of characteristics, identity, and destiny. Antigonus did not resist, and all of this took less than 5 minutes. These stolen elements, which began to merge within her body, placed a certain burden on Shah's mind, such as a sense of identity confusion caused by the emergence of memories of others. However, Shah's foundation was strong enough that some relatively independent Worm of Time clones were unaffected. They stole the food's uniqueness from Tudor and incorporated it directly into their bodies to begin fusion. All it would take was one grafting onto their bodies. Error 1, and merging with Fool 1+1 is still quite dangerous. But Shah actually felt quite relaxed. Tudor in action. Ah, I feel a little dizzy. This was almost the only feeling Shah had. As for her mind being in complete chaos, that was just a habit. The fusion of his internal characteristics went very smoothly. Logically speaking, to replace Antigonus and accommodate uniqueness, a simple promotion ceremony should be held, otherwise, how could it be accommodated? Not everyone is an ancient god. There have only been 8 throughout history, and who knows if those 8 actually completed the ascension ceremony by some twist of fate. However, since there are many similar experiences that can meet the requirements of a ceremony, Shah completely skipped the step of holding a ceremony. What is a ceremony? I don't know. His state rapidly ascended, and his consciousness was also restrained, not immersed in that experience. When the uniqueness and beyond characteristic were almost fully integrated, and his mind began to want to wreak havoc, he released the theft. Antigonus's identity, destiny, and Beander characteristic should have returned immediately. The process of merging uniqueness with the characteristic was grafted back by Shah along with the grafted Beander ability, and the cufflinks were removed. The power of time displacement also came into play, giving him more time to operate. 1 second ago, Shah completed the process of embracing uniqueness. The next second, Antigonus absorbed uniqueness. Fate thought this was pretty cool. After a splash of water to show its attitude, it returned to calm. Because he lost the maddening root of the problem, the beyond characteristic and uniqueness, Shah's headache was relieved, and he was able to recover gradually. The fusion of Fool's uniqueness and the complete set of Sequence 1 characteristics was completed in Antigonus, identity and destiny. Now, everything has returned to Antigonus. Apart from some initial discomfort, it can be considered complete. Regardless of who the man in the bridal chamber is, the complete set is now registered in the Antigonus family. That's how easily this matter was resolved. Tudor and Philonas, watching from the side, were somewhat astonished. Antigonus was stunned for a moment, and then it was over. It seemed too easy. Tudor even had some doubts about how the god of knowledge and wisdom, Elf Queen, had completed her ascension ceremony. In this era that values hard work, lying down and doing nothing is really despicable. You may need to get used to this power. Oh, right, don't get any ideas about Spirit World's authority. Trust the experience of the pioneers, you can't control it. Shah returned the grafting ability, and then her figure faded and disappeared. He was reluctant to mention the authority of the Lord of the Mysteries, the controller of the spirit world. Perhaps the memories from his time travel were too chaotic. He remembered that in the earliest days, the door was the one most closely connected to the spirit world among the three pathways, which was in line with traditional understanding. Moreover, the Phoenix progenitor was said to have gained some control over the spirit world by virtue of some of the door's authority. Then, it was later said that although the Lord of the Mysteries is the true Lord of the spirit world, possessing complete symbols, compared to the path of error, who merely uses the spirit world to decipher and influence the mind, and the door, who uses the spirit world for travel, the Fool pathway holds most of the authority in the spirit world. The Fool is almost a smaller version of the Lord of the spirit world, and so on. The question is about the spirit thread, and other random, nonsensical abilities. Shah can only attribute it to the fact that, as the Lord of the spirit world, he had received too much information beforehand, a mix of correct, incorrect, toxic, and non-toxic information. Even death didn't dare to call itself Little Eternal Darkness, but Fool dared to call himself Little Lord of the Spirit World. It's clear that the confidence comes from the resurrection of the Celestial Venerable. After Shah left, Antigonus was briefly confused, but his eyes regained their liveliness. At least, it seems like he didn't really trick you. Tudor pondered for a moment and said that as someone who witnessed the whole thing, Archangel could see something. Shah didn't directly use her own ritual for Antigonus. Instead, she used her own ritual to create a simple ritual for Antigonus that belonged to him. It's impossible to say that there were no side effects. The only difference was that his mindset would be slightly biased towards Shah. But Antigonus, as the demonic wolf, didn't care at all. This was practically a huge win for him. Compared to the original timeline, where the two kings of angels captured a demigod to help Antigonus complete the ritual, now it was as if Antigonus had brainwashed and controlled a sequence one to help him complete the ritual. The difficulty of the ritual determined its effectiveness. His Majesty seems to have a good reputation. Tudor was tempted and wanted to get Jacob to help him build his tomb. However, it's best to leave it for now. He's still unsure of Jacob's true feelings towards the Black Emperor. Tudor thinks it's better to be more tactful, demonstrate his absolute value, and then consider inviting Jacob over as a convenient and worthwhile move. Jacob, isn't helping Antigonus just helping yourself in a roundabout way? So I'm still an Archon. From the time of the Solomon Empire, with the black and white emperors, to the present day, this is how the Archon is perceived by these 7 deities. Her hands clenched slightly, her chest pounding with a thirst for power and ambition, a relentless pursuit of higher status. This was itself the Black Emperor. A kind of destiny for pathways. Alistair Tudor felt she didn't have enough influence, but that didn't matter. She went to see Mr. Dorr. This is a rather formal invitation. She hopes that Mr. Dorr can help her secretly build the tombs needed for her ascension to the Black Emperor in various places, complete some of the small steps, such as setting up spatial barriers and creating teleportation doors. Mr. Dorr accepted the invitation. The reason is simple: Tudor came to him instead of contacting the 7 gods, which is enough to explain the other party's attitude. Moreover, while Mr. Dorr himself may be able to come and go as he pleases, the Abrahams, big and small, still need to eat. Tudor has since connected with the 2 kings of angels. She did want to go find the 7 gods, but those gods were all eccentric and cunning. Not to mention the 3 goddesses, they were all the type who didn't like to express their opinions easily. As a woman herself, Tudor didn't want to waste her time. The Eternal Blazing Sun Church once nurtured a Black Emperor. Attempting to follow the path Solomon took might only lead to humiliation. The War God Church and Storm Church are actually more masculine in nature. The support of God of Combat is of little use. By winning over God of Combat, Truncest will automatically gain the support of Evernight Goddess. Storm Church clearly favors Truncest, perhaps to wash away the shame of being expelled from the North Continent, as they even moved their headquarters, Storm Source, back to Backland. Tudor knew that, on the one hand, she had worked for the White Emperor, and on the other hand, she was a woman, while Storm Church clearly favored men. Fortunately, none of the 7 gods want to see a new Black Emperor emerge, so she and Truncest are on equal footing and still have a chance to make their plans. Greater than Tolsna lying dead, Tudor and Truncest maintain a facade of harmony, but secretly they are still scheming. It's hard to say which of them has better political skills. In any case, they both make more friends and fewer enemies. Tudor, in particular, is quite popular. In various aspects, you can cooperate with different people, such as building a tomb with Mr. Dorr to maintain influence in the Trier region, choosing to cooperate with Shah to increase your own power, and choosing to cooperate with Antigonus. She had many things to prepare, and she was working with specific people on different projects. On the surface, everything seemed peaceful and stable, but behind the scenes, a network of relationships had already been formed. Please remember that a huge selection of Taiwanese novels await you on this website for the fastest chapter updates. Similarly, on the southern continent, the Xingxing Plateau, the Pa River Valley, and the Haigati grassland successively established the cities of Pa and Haigati. The highland nations began to submit to the Aegis Empire. These countries were originally established with the support of the tritheistic church during its time in the southern continent. The fall of the Dragon of Wisdom and the occasional respawn of Hermit facilitated the alliance between the eternal blazing sun and the Lord of Storms. This alliance was fraught with ups and downs, and although it appeared relatively stable on the surface, the influence of both churches retreated to the North Continent, concentrating their forces in areas where their churches were more concentrated to prevent targeted attacks. Death, Salinger was quietly waiting for the southern continent to be unified. Shah took the opportunity to refresh the area there, occupying the Star Plateau in West Balam and expanding the territory of the Highland Kingdom to the entire West Balam. Salinger saw this but was powerless to do anything about it. He might be able to bring back the Lord of Storms, the eternal blazing sun, or the fallen god, which would be an excellent way to suppress Shah. However, the former is not so easy, as the gods do not have a high demand for land. The faith of the North Continent can fully satisfy the needs of the eternal blazing sun and the fallen god. The latter, Salinger doesn't want to see Hermit, nor fallen god, and certainly not both of them together. Thus, the southern continent was geographically divided into two halves, namely the east-west Balam. Poor god of spiritual objects, hidden among the mountains of the southern continent. Tolsna began moving house with tears in her eyes. However, it was too late. Shah appeared in the cave of the god of spiritual objects, sitting on a pitch-black coffin. It was hard to understand why, in the southern continent, people preferred to use coffins instead of beds. Finding the King of Angels of the Bound One pathway is easy, or rather, very difficult, as Mutant knows best where Mutant is. In his terror, Tolsna attempted to disappear through the spirit world, but before he could do so, his body became heavy, his thoughts sluggish, as if his mind and body were bound, unable to be free or resist. Moreover, his connection with the spirit world and the outside world was severed. This is the authority of the chained. Tolsna, should I praise you? Shah held a semi-transparent wooden figure wrapped in bandages in his hand and said. He was still quite clear about what curse Tolsna had chosen when he ascended to the angelic realm. In the realm of curses, the more information one had, the easier it was to win, especially since he was also able to materialize an almost identical curse. King. Beneath the coffin, Tolsna's voice was filled with disbelief, and a hint of relief. During the last battle, he vaguely sensed something, but he couldn't identify it at the time. On one hand, he didn't have the time, and on the other hand, doing so might result in a triple kill on the spot, which was too risky. God of spiritual objects gave up the fight. The knowledge-based dual pathway true God was pressing down on the coffin, and it was none other than the former boss who knew him so well. It was best to be obedient in order to survive. I have many questions. Shah waved his hand, and the bandages wrapped around the semi-transparent little figure in front of him began to untie. However, what was inside were not human limbs, but various complexes. Tolsna inside the coffin knew that the open black lens bracket different species king close black lens bracket was re-evaluating him, but there was nothing he could do. After all, he was just a weak king of angels. Even Salinger was luckier, at least the Phoenix gift pack Salinger found was relatively complete. Tolsna couldn't acquire enough of the characteristics to become a god. Although he had the advantage in terms of distance when picking up the open black lens bracket different species king close black lens bracket fragments, he was just an angel at the time, so the demon monarch had to exert influence remotely and take away a portion of it. If I can't become a god, then I can only be the king of angels. Shah briefly analyzed the curses, noting that they are categorized, some being self-realized and others learned later. In Tolsna's case, Shah saw many things, some of which, even by today's standards, are astonishing and seem more like something from Cosmos. Are you alright? For some reason, Shah can only say that her courage is commendable. Bats are not edible, and the bag from different species king is not so easy to pick up either. My king, it was Sasrir who helped me. He also taught me the concepts of temperance and asceticism. Inside the coffin, Tolsna wore an expression like that of an ascetic. This is funny, but it makes perfect sense. The uniqueness and traits left behind by the different species king are similar to the uniqueness that Lilith possessed, both having some issues. Lilith's uniqueness, which she didn't consume at night, was likely achieved by using her authority to put the uniqueness into a state of dormancy, thus reducing its impact on her. What about Tolsna? Both are subordinate gods. After Antigonus obtained full 1+1, he waited until the 4th epoch before transforming into human form and becoming Sequence 1. After receiving funding and help, he was able to rise to the position of King of Angels. Maybe his fool traits were even purer. Tolsna is fine as long as he's not in trouble, but this low-key and honest kid was still tricked into joining Rose Redemption. It's impossible that he actually had a change of heart. A mutant. Pathway's King of Angels might be thinking of going to face the super-powered version of ancient sun god who can deal high damage and counter it. If conscience matters, why didn't Farbati join Rose Redemption? That guy is supposedly an old-timer. After Tolsna confessed, Shah-Ur understood that Tolsna's madness was unavoidable. The King of Kings Angel, through the omnipotent sorcerer of the Omniscience Stone Tablet, purified Tolsna and taught the ascetics the concept of temperance, possibly even the Bible. Since he was being fed, Tolsna had no choice but to go along with it. Hey, he quite likes to recruit wandering ancient gods. Shah-Ur smiled, took out a contract, and tossed it to Tolsna. This is essentially a pledge of allegiance. It wouldn't normally be necessary, but since Tolsna voted for Grisha once, signing an agreement is essential. This is a matter of principle. If Tolsna signs the contract and still dares to waver, they're as good as dead. Greater than. The ritual of chain. Tolsna didn't hesitate much and resolutely signed the contract with severe penalties. This contract is not very damaging, but once signed, it will bind you to Tolsna's open black lens bracket anchor close black lens bracket to a certain extent, just as Sun Pathway's brilliance dims and its power diminishes once it abandons the justice it believes in. Chained is the pathway most adept at self-imposed constraints, self-torture, and self-struggle. Tolsna's acceptance of this contract is tantamount to acting as chained in mutant. The unique features of Pathway have added a constraint to itself. This is both a shackle and a protection, akin to a grand ambition. By violating the contract, Tolsna has broken the vow, which is tantamount to breaking the vow, and once the vow is broken, it is considered indulgence. Tolsna, a king of angels who has been adhering to a long-term path of restraint, has inner desires and madness that are like a volcano. If he indulges himself even once, this hard-won volcano will erupt completely. It won't be a minor, chaotic eruption, but a massive, earth-shattering outburst. At that point, it will be hard to say whether this king of angels will be able to mitigate the negative impact of Pathway itself. But if he does not break the covenant, this can also be considered an open black lens bracket anchor close black lens bracket, although this open black lens bracket anchor close black lens bracket is not formed by the faith of many believers, but is woven by the power of Hermit and blessed by Tolsna's own authority, and is an open black lens bracket anchor close black lens bracket formed through one's own beliefs or faith. Whether this so-called loyalty, or commitment, is persistence, obsession, or a performance. The longer this contract is maintained, the more stable this anchor becomes. Even if Tolsna's consciousness eventually reaches its limit, his spirit completely collapses, and he indulges in depravity, losing his restraint and true nature. As long as he remembers this contract, remembers this self-discipline, and maintains his spiritual identification with Shah-Ur, then this open black lens bracket anchor close black lens bracket will hold on to Tolsna's final spirit. This also means that Tolsna will continue to see himself as the subordinate god of open black lens bracket different species king close black lens bracket, acknowledging this former identity, not betraying this origin, and marking this spiritual imprint for a long time. Shah-Ur was somewhat surprised to see Tolsna sign without hesitation. Unexpected events are certain. This is not as simple as the open black lens bracket ancient god close black lens bracket sealing or suppressing the open black lens bracket subordinate god close black lens bracket, the dual pathway true god, and the king of angels. The Evernight goddess and lord of storms later used their own power to deal with Mr. Door. Shah-Ur is now relying on his knowledge of mutant pathway, through his own understanding, built a cage and asked Tolsna to entrust his authority to it and to sustain it with his authority, spirituality, and mind. This is using Tolsna's power to bind Tolsna. He had thought that this guy would at least struggle a little. My king, in the ancient times, even though you were one of the most insane ancient gods, and even though the mutants generally lacked thought and morality, you were still the protector of our race. I am unwilling to disobey you, and I am powerless to disobey you. Tolsna, however, spoke quite frankly. He made no mere verbal promise, but truly incorporated the identity of open black lens bracket subordinate god close black lens bracket into the core principles he was to uphold. It was a part that had to be adhered to, a part that was different from those desires that needed to be restrained, and a kind of faith that originated from himself, was based on open black lens bracket different species king close black lens bracket, and ultimately returned to himself. If one abandons this faith, it is an undeniable fall from grace. For a king of angels who intends to follow the path of temperance, such a fall from grace means the failure of long-term perseverance and asceticism. It is a form of self-denial, making one susceptible to influence and turning into a second open black lens bracket different species king close black lens bracket. God of spiritual objects made this decision quite easily. His own supreme God had returned in triumph, suppressing him as easily as capturing a chick. Moreover, the supreme God had not chosen to resurrect within him after his fall, or perhaps he had tried but failed. Now that he had returned, he had no intention of settling scores with him. For a cruel ancient king, this was practically a blessing. After all, God of spiritual objects has no doubt that if the different species king really wanted to kill him, his resurrection and other backup plans would most likely be useless. Everything God of spiritual objects has now is built on the foundation of the different species king, with the only change being the temperance training introduced with reference to the ascetic. But this doesn't stop the different species king from killing himself. Restraint and indulgence are of little use to his superiors, who are also well aware of death. Therefore, Tolsna dutifully chose loyalty, and genuinely hoped that Shah-Ur would continue to play along. You see, if Shah-Ur hadn't come to recruit him, Tolsna was already planning to move away, as things weren't going well in the North and South continents these days. It would be so much better if you were a little more assertive. Because Tolsna was so cooperative, Shah-Ur couldn't just ignore him completely. Thinking of Tolsna lying dead in jail in 5th epic, he felt that Tolsna was somewhat prescient at this moment, although it was more of an instinctive reaction based on his current predicament and past experiences. I don't have any demands on you. West Balam is free, you can look after it for a bit. Shah-Ur jumped down from the coffin without mentioning the Bound 1 Pathways Ascension ritual. After all, Tolsna couldn't collect the last trait, so there was no point in discussing the Bound 1 Pathways Ascension ritual. Although there is only one kind of ritual for becoming a god, it is a process with two sides. Just as the Bound 1 pathway symbolizes restraint and indulgence when facing desires, and the choice to make when facing desires, the ritual for becoming a god is also very simple. Tolsna's current idea is restraint. Therefore, the simplest way for him to become a god is to remain true to the covenant and practice self-discipline even after becoming a true god and a god-chained being, and continue to serve as Shah-Ur's subordinate god. This is explained from the perspective of restraint and constraint. After all, a true god does not need to be the subordinate god of another true god. He already has the ability to break free from such restrictions. However, he chooses not to do so. Even if he has the ability to break free from the shackles, he still restrains himself and willingly becomes the subordinate god of the other. Regardless of whether the other party is a god or has fallen and descended to the rank of angel. This is a belief in the existence of the other, a belief that limits and binds the self, but also maintains the self-awareness of God of spiritual objects. The ritual of indulgence is even simpler. The simplest is to touch the desire of the mother tree of desire, which is enough indulgence. Or to take it a step further, kill the very beliefs you hold dear. If your faith in Shah-Ur is genuine enough, then kill Shah-Ur. If you don't have that faith, then kill yourself. What kind of indulgence is it if you don't break through your own limitations? By indulging, one breaks free from constraints, only to fall into an even larger and more inescapable bondage, becoming entangled in a continuous struggle against oneself. The core lies in recognizing the essence of desire through constant self-torture, in endless pain and struggle. Greater than. Wouldn't it be better to just kill Tamara? If God of spiritual objects chooses the tempered face and continues in that direction. That would create a relationship between a open black lens bracket God close black lens bracket and a open black lens bracket King close black lens bracket. This book is first published on Read Good Books Taiwan, offering a worry-free reading experience with error-free and orderly chapters. Open black lens bracket Wong close black lens bracket even a regular low sequence Beander. Open black lens bracket God close black lens bracket still honors his own king and venerates the king as open black lens bracket King close black lens bracket. When a king cannot use force to intimidate a king of angels, or even a god, the binding force between the two parties lies solely with the chained. If chained is willing to exercise self-discipline, self-restraint, and self-binding, then the more serious he is in his attitude toward open black lens bracket the king close black lens bracket, the stronger his self-discipline will be, and the better his own state will be. This is a path sufficient to complete the ritual of godhood and to adhere to it consistently over the long term. Even though Shah-Ur is now clearly stronger than God of spiritual objects, this path can still be effective. Because God of spiritual objects succumbed to the will of Shah-Ur and chose to embark on this path. This is also a kind of distortion and constraint on the God of spiritual objects. When one reaches the point of becoming a god, there is a turning point. One option is to continue to restrain oneself, even if one has the opportunity to break free from constraints after becoming a god, one will still bind oneself. The other option is to indulge oneself, break free from constraints, accept the backlash, and if one survives, one will naturally become more distorted. However, God of spiritual objects can probably only remain loyal. Sha'ur doesn't regret it at all, she crushed all the other old days remnants of gray mist. There might be many Zhou Mingrus and Huangtaos among them, and perhaps some underage girls or college girls, and some innocent, kind-hearted boys. He didn't want these compatriots to experience a life that wouldn't be beautiful in this very unpleasant world. He has the ability to take care of everyone, and he might actually provide a lot of care, because he cannot tolerate his fellow countrymen with the same cultural heritage being bullied by other people on this earth. But he also doesn't want to arrange for each person to be placed in a good family and then constantly monitor their lives. Let these things fade away with the wind. You can rest well, but our civilization will continue to be passed down, I promise. Sha'ur glanced in the direction of the western continent, where the spark of civilization had already been lit. Since the north and south continents have chosen this lifestyle, the gap has already widened. Even if it's just an ideological issue. Time flies, Black Emperor Solomon showed signs of resurrection. Even though all 9 tombs were destroyed, such a centripetal force emerged from the remaining order alone. The most basic form of the order established by the Black Emperor was the unification of the North Continent. The 2 princes of abolition were the first to sense the crisis. There was some unusual movement in their Beander characteristic. If Solomon hadn't left no tombs, they would have been resurrected directly instead of just showing some fetal movement. Moreover, it wasn't just a spiritual warning from within myself, a certain unnamed deity also posted the message on Spirit World. This blow is quite heavy for Tudor. He secretly contacted Aemon and Adam, recruited some other people, and after making sufficient preparations, hunted down the escaped angels of the Solomon family. Before he could take it a step further, the Black Emperor wanted to be resurrected in return. On the other side, Truncest's expression was equally grim. If Solomon were to resurrect, he would fall from his position in Sequence 1 and would inevitably be purged. The feeling of trait aggregation he had experienced earlier was not unreal. His expression changed several times as he pondered how to deal with it. Truncest was able to join the Archon of the United Empire, and of course, he had already pledged his allegiance. He personally raised several of Solomon's 9 tombs. If the Black Emperor were to return as a god, Truncest, as a low-ranking Sequence, would naturally be in a terrible predicament. No, I need to think of a solution. Neither of the Archangels was the type to sit idly by and wait for their doom. The other 6 gods certainly didn't want to see Solomon return either, but what could they do? Introducing a new Black Emperor temporarily could prevent Solomon's resurrection, but this would require sacrificing either Tudor or Truncest, and the Black Emperor's 3+1 heir not actually complete yet, making it difficult for the 6 gods to reach an agreement on this matter. Tudor went directly to Sha'ur and asked him to help him come up with a solution. Shall I steal the Sequence 1 feature for you? Sha'ur's suggestion was reasonable. Choose to reduce your sequence to save your life, and then seek refuge with a true god, you can still survive. Let me think about it some more. Ms. Tudor nodded, then couldn't help but ask, do you think it's too late for me to switch pathways now? Of course there's enough time. Why don't you just kill Tamara? Sha'ur looked at Tudor. With Tudor's social skills, he didn't believe that Alice Tower wouldn't know Tamara. With neighboring pathways being competitors, it would be strange if she didn't pay attention to her. You're right. Can you lend me a hand? Alistair Tudor lowered his eyes slightly, adopting a somewhat sorrowful posture. Although we both knew it was an act, it looked quite nice. I'm not interested. If you team up with Antigonus and the others, can't you even clear Tamara? Sha'ur shook his head and said. Tudor wasn't disappointed, he had clearly been thinking the same thing all along, and was just testing Sha'ur's attitude. She was quite satisfied with the result. This shows that although Sha'ur does not intend to support her, he is still quite supportive of her. As long as she can complete most of the preparations, Sha'ur should not mind giving her a push. Next, let's set up a trap to deal with Tamara. Tudor had already planned it out. He had to bring along 2 demonic wolf angels, 3 angels surrounding and killing 1 angel would be enough. If that's still not enough, she has a backup plan. Even if it comes at a price, she can still call in more people. At that moment, Sha'ur called out to Tudor, who was about to return to carry out his operation, with a strange expression. What's wrong? Tudor glanced at Sha'ur with a puzzled look. Was this an attempt to give her more support? It didn't seem like it. Well, you might be a step too late. Sha'ur helplessly shrugged and said. Tudor was taken aback, then realized what he meant, truncest. %. The insults were a bit vulgar. Tudor had already left, filled with anger. She had only delayed for a short while. How could truncest have acted so quickly? Because their attitude towards surrendering was far more decisive than yours, and their demeanor was also much more. Shah offered a moment of silence for Tamara. This gentleman on the order side couldn't escape at all. Although the gods still had some dignity and didn't directly intervene, sealing off the battlefield, keeping information secret, and cutting off escape routes, as long as they showed a show of support, Tamara, who had no backing, was simply gone. So you can't blame those archangels and king of angels for sometimes sticking together, they're probably forced into it. Greater than Adam's thought process. Truncest clearly received more support. At least he was one step ahead of Tudor in making strides on the Inquisitor pathway. This seems a bit unbelievable, but it's normal, since the people over there are much more generous than Shah. If you say you support it, then get straight to it, no beating around the bush. Tudor was already a step too late. If she wanted to gain support among the 6 gods, she would have to face the wicked Evernight goddess, the wicked Earth Mother, and the wicked god of wisdom. Winning the approval of 3 women would be much more troublesome than winning the approval of 3 male gods on Truncest's side. Shah, however, didn't get involved in this matter. He was even wondering how long it would take for Tudor, filled with unease and resentment, to turn his attention to Red Priest. Port Pathway 3. For reading Taiwanese novels, choose Super Smooth. As for Trunsoist, it doesn't matter who becomes the Night Emperor. Even the Black Emperor goes to jail when he takes the throne, so the Night Emperor probably has to repay favors and debts to get to power. He turned an hourglass upside down. The time for the Black Emperor's resurrection was not far off. As time passed, the atmosphere in Belinland, the capital of the United Empire, became subtle. Truncest's advance has been relentless, and Tudor is clearly becoming anxious. In such a dangerous situation, Tudor either has to back down and let Shah help him use his ability to return to his original ecological niche, or he has to tough it out. However, if he does that, Tudor's prestige will continue to decline, and his relationship with Mr. Door and the 2 demonic wolves may even change. At this point, the 6 gods, including Shah, are unreliable. Tudor took a deep breath and looked at the 2 people in the shadows. The blonde priest still had a kind expression, but the expression on the man with the monocle was somewhat inscrutable. He took a step back and stood behind the blonde priest, as if to say, "This is none of my business." "And what's the price?" Tudor looked into Adam's calm, still eyes and asked. "This matter itself is the price to pay." Adam took out a second piece of blasphemy slate. The symbols on it disappeared and then reappeared, until only Red Priest remained. The knowledge of Pathway, and the Red Priest's ascension ritual was to start a war that swept across the continent and achieve enough victories. Yes, it's not simple at all. Watching the ascension ceremony, Tudor doubted how much influence he still had on the western side of the North Continent. Moreover, he also needs to eliminate Medici, Sauron, and Einhorn, all 3 of whom are very troublesome figures. "Will you create an opportunity for me?" Tudor looked at Adam and asked. Adam didn't speak, he just nodded calmly. "Then at least let's complete the first step." Tudor planned to set a trap for Einhorn. However, it's important to control the time frame and keep a low profile as much as possible before the plan begins. Luckily, I have some connections with Einhorn. Tudor left. Adam and Eamon exchanged a glance, both intending to leave. "Are you helping Tudor?" Eamon adjusted his monocle, his tone as relaxed as ever. Adam did not answer the question. "It's definitely not for Medici." Eamon smiled. Adam's expression changed slightly this time, but Eamon clearly didn't want to hear his explanation. In the Little Crow's view, neither of his fathers was a father, so there was nothing to talk about. So Eamon turned into a little crow and flew away, leaving Adam behind. Shah appeared after Eamon left. He looked at the silent Adam and didn't really understand what the visionary's promotion ceremony was all about. If we're talking about driving the trajectory of history, Adam seems to have succeeded many times, supporting the establishment of the Tudor dynasty, even indirectly causing the War of the 4 Emperors, and even later figures like Rosal and Intis dominating the world. How can that not be considered a major trend of the times? Or is it that the divinity is so strong that the ritual must be performed while it's still fresh? What do you want to confirm? Or do something? Shah looked at Adam and asked. "Did you help Cheek complete the ritual?" Although Adam's question was directed at someone, his tone sounded like a statement. Shah nodded. It wasn't exactly a secret. Adam didn't press further about whether Shah would still help Tudor complete the Red Priest ritual, he was more concerned about something else. "You have similar traits to me, but the last time you lost control was because of the will of the mysteries." This is something Adam can't quite understand. A regular number portability system can't be this smooth, and multiple contaminations are equally hard to explain. But with Sun God's experience as a reference, it's easy for Adam to think of a possibility. I awoke from the chaos sea. Perhaps you should also wake up in the East, in a similar way. Adam said, though he wasn't entirely sure himself, but he did feel that Sha'ur was similar to him. That special feeling wasn't built on blasphemy slate or the chaotic authority of demoness, it was the kind of intimacy that came from spending a long time in the chaos sea. Huh, what are you talking about? Sha'ur blinked, almost laughing at Adam's words. This is just a guess. Obviously, the East is the territory of the mysteries, so you can only appear here. Adam laid out his thoughts completely. During his time as the Omniscience, he had already speculated about the history between God Almighty and the celestial being. He was born with two paths, the Son and the Hanged Man, the first being a blasphemy slate, and also including error. Uniqueness, none of these are accidental. Error, it's hard to say whether uniqueness was torn from God Almighty's body, or whether God Almighty half-heartedly or actively threw it into the chaos sea to help suppress God Almighty's resurrected consciousness. If he is like this, then perhaps the equally miraculous Sha'ur is the same. Adam even considered that Sha'ur might have been born on the western continent, and upon awakening there, should have inherited the storm pathway, the legacy of the elves, just as she inherited the legacy of the Sun and the Hanged Man. Same as pathway. But it is clear that the western continent is the territory of celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, and the western continent is still sealed by the grey fog. God Almighty can resolve errors. Uniqueness can be torn off from the celestial venerable, or the celestial venerable may be willing to temporarily abandon error. Uniqueness. So, was Sha'ur also pulled out of the chaos sea by the celestials at that time and automatically captured by the grey mist? He had been soaked in the chaos sea and then hung on the Saphira castle for so long, which is why he was able to have some special characteristics between the two Saphiras. Sha'ur was shocked by Adam's wild imagination. Why don't you just say that the celestial being and God Almighty each tore off a pathway from the other? The celestial lord threw all the other Saphiras into the western continent, including the uniqueness of the storm pathway, to completely isolate them and prevent the true primordial God Almighty from being born smoothly. Then, before the seal was completed, the power of the chaos sea also seeped into the western continent from the surface, intending to take advantage of the situation and elevate me. Once the western continent was sealed, I would directly inherit the storm pathway and dismantle the celestial venerable's backup plan in the western continent. However, before I could even open my eyes, I was automatically picked up and banned. 3 dynasties. You weren't a spy before you traveled through time. Consider Chernobyl, the Russian researcher, and other classic collocations. Sha'ur really felt that Grisha could probably double as a researcher, a spy, a political commissar, and even Jesus, as the ending of the glorious era was so beautiful. How could I possibly become a god just by sleeping? Sha'ur didn't believe he had such good luck. If Adam's prediction came true, did he almost become the God Almighty of the western continent, and then get killed before he could even be born? And when he opened his eyes again, he was obediently living as an elf in the north and south continents. Why don't you find a way to sever the connection with the two Saphira? Adam didn't quite understand. Sha'ur had already gathered all the knowledge of the second pathway, so why was he still entangled with all 5 families and the 3 great families of mystery? No one knew Saphira's horror better than him. Then why don't you return and merge with fallen God? The fallen God can draw away the pollution of the chaos sea, and the second blasphemy slate should reduce the risks of the operation. With a true God capable of manipulating the Saphira through 2 pathways, what is there to fear? If Medici can be sacrificed, wouldn't it be making the best use of him to let fallen God hurt him? But it's no wonder. The Black Emperor would rather let the 6 gods obtain uniqueness than entrust it to fallen God. Regardless of whether it's trust or not, Shepherd always naturally inspires fear. Sha'ur looked at Adam with equal confusion. If you were to return to fallen God and then herd Red Priest again. Uniqueness, based on the blood relationship between the 2 families of disaster and the all 5 families, is roughly equivalent to the 3 pathways of God. If that's not enough, then we can also cultivate the uniqueness of destiny. Amon's parasitism is reversible, and so is grazing. If this is made clear, how could Medici and Ouroboros possibly refuse? The 2 looked at each other, neither saying a word. The slogan of salvation is too pale. Perhaps in the 5th epic, it would be a powerful statement, the meaning of existence, something worth sacrificing everything for. But now, in the 4th epic, it doesn't work, it seems too pale. Saving the world 3,000 years from now. Well, what about now? You must have your own selfish motives too. The divine aspect of this ancient sun god, the fanatic in the eyes of the world, has departed. Sha'ur can't read minds of a spectator pathway king of angels, but he does have some guesses about Adam's psychology. Perhaps he's also feeling lost. Feeling lost. I don't know what's right or what's justice. When the ancient sun god was born, humanity was enslaved by other extraordinary races. He did not lack a direction for progress, but rather sought to reclaim authority and liberate humanity, which is exactly what he did. Once he truly accomplished this, throughout the entire glorious era, regardless of whether that period was good or bad, the ancient sun god would not doubt himself, nor would he be confused, because the sun does not doubt itself. Moreover, he then had the highest priority, to contend with the resurrected consciousness of the primordial God Almighty. I wasn't confused when sun was around, but what about after I lost sun? With only the degenerate side remaining, the dark side of humanity becomes even clearer. Adam, having lived through an era as the eldest son of the sun god, suddenly awakened to the divine aspect of the ancient sun god. Even though this awakening was irreversible, Adam's detailed and objective observation report as a spectator regarding the ancient sun god himself and the entire glorious era was enough to make the ancient sun god feel complicated. Sun does not recognize itself as an error. Even if you think that way at first, once sun separates error and gives birth to its second son Amen, creator, will no longer have error. That's why Sha'ur felt that Adam was somewhat lost. Adam wasn't unaware that returning to fallen God might be better, but since fallen God hadn't given up the title of God Almighty, his primary goal was probably more focused on revenge. After all, he is a deity who has recovered from negative emotions. It is somewhat difficult for him to be objective and fair in his thinking and examination, as he is not biased in his mind. Adam may also know that if he returns, it will inevitably be under the leadership of fallen God, who will gather all his power to reclaim his authority, and then perhaps restart the second glorious era until the end of the world. Throughout the third epoch, the radiance of the sun god is everywhere. Miracles are everywhere, and the influence of the gods is everywhere, but the impact of the extraordinary on reality is limited. Even the mighty ancient sun god did not choose to use the power of the extraordinary to completely and massively transform the world. So Grisha at the time hoped to maintain this environment so that humanity could evolve a civilization adapted to the extraordinary environment. However, all of this came to an abrupt end with his fall, and what I did in the Solomon Empire was perhaps what the ancient sun god hoped to see, except that it was not the evolution of ordinary people themselves, but a change with a clear direction that was promoted from top to bottom by the White Emperor. Sha'ur had a pretty good grasp of Adam's psychology, and he chose to agree with him. Although Adam wasn't as prescient as Soothsayer, as the king of angels of the spectator pathway, he could see from various aspects the situation that Sha'ur wanted to create, and Adam didn't object to it, but instead planned to continue to build on this foundation. The North Continent will have 3 nations, 3 empires, and 3 dynasties. The first one is the restored Second Solomon Empire. He will inherit part of the legal system of the First Solomon Empire, which will be an empire with 1 emperor and 1 church. Politically, there will only be 1 black emperor, and in terms of faith, fallen God will be the absolute mainstream. The spirit system built by the White Emperor will also be continued. The Zoroastrian family and the Zoroast family will be the key to communication between the real world and the spirit world. The second is the Tudor Empire. This will be a dynasty ruled by emperors and extraordinary nobles. The third is the Truncest Empire. This will be the United Empire, built by the emperor as the head and the 7 gods as the overseers. This standoff may last a long time, and perhaps what Adam wants to observe lies within it. Then let's add another control group, the Highlands Kingdom of the Southern Continent. At the right time, it can also submit to the Balaam Empire, allowing the Eggers family to complete the unification of the Southern Continent. Although Sha'ur knew that none of the 4 empires were perfect, he still wanted to see what life was like for ordinary people in each of them. In the era of the Black and White Emperors, the White Emperor introduced some door barriers to large-scale infrastructure projects. By introducing natural spirits and mysticism, he made mystical creations easy to use but not easy to learn. He also did not intend to truly promote an industrial system based on the real world. Otherwise, the proliferation of machine guns, cannons, and missiles will only make the war more brutal and will only make mid to high sequence beyonders more inclined to use heavy-handed tactics when facing ordinary soldiers. Greater than the frustrated Einhorn. With Tudor's meeting with Adam, a conspiracy quietly began to unfold. First, the conflict between Tudor and Truncest intensified. Although the 7 gods, including Hermit, did not make a clear statement, their ambiguous stance only exacerbated the internal chaos, which in turn made it easier for the conflict to escalate. For ambitious individuals like Conspirer, this is a perfect time. The conflict between the Antigonus family and the Zeratul family intensified, though it did not occur openly. The escalating conflict between the Jacob, Ammon, and Zoroast families, though not openly discussed, has led the Jacob family, already feeling threatened, to plant a treasure, or rather a trap, in Backland. Conceptually, the two are not contradictory. The Black Emperor, the paradoxical family of the Inquisitor pathway, has lost an angel in Tamara and another among the remaining angels of Solomon. Red Priest. The contradictions of the pathway intensify with the dynamic transmission of the environment. Medici has long wanted to collect the remaining two traits and complete the ascension ritual. He has already done it many times, following the ancient sun god in the Grand Slam, participating in the god-slaying War of Rose Redemption, and unifying the North Continent with the power of Solomon in the Black Emperor's camp. These were all major, significant wars that swept across an entire continent. No one has ever said that Red Priest must be a king, and cannot be a general or a vassal who makes a name for himself. Medici faced almost no obstacles in becoming a god, but he was just unlucky enough to fail to achieve it. People who didn't know better might think that Ouroboros had sucked away Medici's good luck. Throughout the entire glorious era, spanning over 1,000 years, they couldn't gather the remaining two traits. By the fourth epoch, Sauron and Einhorn were attached to the White Emperor. After the White Emperor stepped down, these two took the opportunity to cooperate with Tutor, the White Emperor's administrative secretary. The two archangels also had a tacit understanding, while Medici didn't find an opportunity. Now that Tutor and Truncest's relationship is in turmoil, the opportunity has arrived. Although Sauron and Einhorn have no personal grudges, they are both women, and their desire to kill each other is practically written on their faces. They may not have any feuds, but they have grudges. They both say things like, "Don't worry about dying. As long as you die, I will take care of your family." Einhorn had to be more careful, since she joined Sha'ur later. Although Sha'ur had been fair during that long period, even though he was closer to Sauron, he had never targeted her and had been lenient in protecting and defending her when necessary. But Einhorn also knew that this was just her former boss's personality. He would protect her when he wanted to, and he would also sell her out when he wanted to. There was no need for it before, but if it came to a point where it was necessary, the other party would definitely push Sauron instead of her. But if she gets rid of Sauron, then her former boss can only push himself down. As long as she doesn't implicate the entire Sauron family, her former boss won't care about internal competition. Therefore, Einhorn was more proactive than Sauron in responding to Tutor's repeated private attempts to meet with her, because she was more eager than Sauron. With Tutor now facing increased competition from Truncest, it's reasonable for them to be courting allies. Faced with yet another request, Einhorn didn't think much of it and treated it as just another normal meeting. Then, she was knocked unconscious. "Fuck you, you bitch." On her deathbed, Einhorn lay on the ground, staring at Tutor, who had taken her heart, and wished she could crawl up from the ground and confront him. "I'm just trying to survive. For the sake of our friendship, I will not harm the Einhorn family." Alista Tutor crouched down, reached out, and helped her best friend close her eyes. At the same time, the twisted power activated, and, closing the eyes, was also twisted into death. His gaze seemed to hold a hint of pity. After all, she and Einhorn had a good personal relationship, but that was quickly replaced by determination and madness. They're both women, Einhorn would understand her. When Tutor left, Antigonus followed, having repaid the favor Antigonus owed Tutor. Sha'ur appeared here, looking at Einhorn's corpse on the ground. It was basically beyond saving. Tutor was Tutor after all, and he certainly wouldn't give Einhorn a chance to get up and fight him. "Wake up." Sha'ur, as if summoning a spirit, gently shook a copper bell. The fragments of spirit, spiritual power, and some residual Beander characteristics remaining inside the corpse on the ground flew into the bronze bell under the influence of the bell's sound. He rang the bell again, and a phantom male figure appeared. It was Einhorn. Sha'ur shook it a little more, and the yin energy attached itself to it. Einhorn's projection turned into a woman again. This was the first time he had seen Einhorn's appearance before the sex change. After Einhorn's mental projection regained some consciousness, its first thought wasn't gratitude, but rather a frustrated and unacceptable question that it had chosen. "You actually chose that percent." Sha'ur plugged his ears slightly. He seemed to understand what Einhorn meant, and felt a pang of sadness that his reputation had been damaged. Einhorn was extremely frustrated. He recalled his past mocking words to Sauron, which felt like a boomerang hitting him. Back when he was under the White Emperor, in Einhorn's eyes, the only difference between him and Sauron was that Sauron had been intimate with Sha'ur before he became a demigod and transformed into a male. Initially, this was considered an important factor in determining intimacy levels. However, Einhorn later discovered that the White Emperor did not treat him and Sauron differently because of this, and was still considered fair, so he breathed a sigh of relief and even mocked Sauron in private. She remained cautious afterward, until she and Sauron were vying for a place in Sequence 1. Sha'ur didn't take action against Conqueror, freeing up resources for Sauron, which led him to abandon his long-held idea of defection and to acknowledge his superior. Since this leader is relatively fair, there's no need to worry. Whether she kills Sauron or Sauron kills her, it's all internal competition. If Medici is killed later, the leaders certainly won't hesitate to give them a push. After all, the Elf Queen, who won without lifting a finger, and the God of Luck, who became the King of Angels, are examples of the two subordinate gods. And what was the result? While she and Sauron were scheming and competing internally, how could you just let Tudor, that bitch, devour me? Why should she? Just because she's a woman. What good is that? Arrived at Red Priest, isn't Pathway still a man? What happened to our tacit understanding? Shouldn't the meat stay in the pot? I don't care which of us you side with, but how could you side with her? How could you do this? Einhorn's mental projection floated over and placed her hands on Sha'ur's shoulders. She was clearly deeply hurt by the betrayal. She had genuinely regarded Sha'ur as her boss before, and even after switching to cooperating with Tudor, she still had a very good impression of Sha'ur and considered her one of her own. So being betrayed and abandoned by her best friend and boss, one after the other, and being the first to be eliminated before she could even begin her scheming plan, made Einhorn feel really frustrated. Medici felt a chill run down his spine. Einhorn's grief and indignation are understandable. After all, in her opinion, even though she was already out of the picture, Sha'ur's continued efforts to save her meant that he still cared about her. If that's the case, then choosing Tudor is really upsetting. What do I lack compared to her? Gender isn't absolute, is it? That guy really jumped to Red Priest. Doesn't Pathway still need to undergo gender reassignment surgery? Of course you are outstanding. I didn't sell you either, but the problem is, Medici was sold. Sha'ur helplessly shrugged and said. He certainly didn't intentionally betray Einhorn or push his own people to their deaths. He didn't gain his current position through betrayal, so he doesn't have that kind of inertial choice. Medici was simply sold. Although he's been sold, Adam doesn't intend to sell him to either of you. Without internal betrayal, a king of angels like Medici, protected by fallen God, is unlikely to fall. Well, Adam's actions weren't called betrayal, they were called the concentrated utilization and redistribution of strategic resources, a new approach. Medici. Einhorn stopped making a fuss because she had enough information and immediately figured out the conspiracy. Red Priest, to put it bluntly, half of Pathway is on Grisha's side and half is on Sha'ur's side. It's unlikely that either side can fulfill the other's wishes. But it's different if it's given to a third party that can't join forces with Truncest and Six Gods. So Sauron is coming to keep me company soon. Could you change her bell? I don't really want to see her lately. Although Einhorn really wanted to mock Sauron for also falling, he didn't want to rub salt into his wounds. He decided to postpone any verbal attacks or other such hurtful exchanges until later. A reasonable request, and it won't take long. Sha'ur put away the bell containing Einhorn. As for the resurrection, there were still procedures to follow. Red Priest, the Pathway's resurrection is not very efficient. A more convenient and less labor-intensive method is to put it back into the Einhorn family and let it slowly progress through the resurrection process over 10 years. Soren's side is close to being caught, since Medici is already preparing a trap for Sauron. Sha'ur's figure transforms into Einhorn's appearance and then disappears, allowing Medici and Sauron to have some fun without realizing that Einhorn has already fallen. Medici was hoping to seize this once-in-a-millennium opportunity to turn the tide, and that once he became a god, he could work with the Lord and Solomon to regain their footing in the North Continent. He devoted almost his entire life to hunting Saurons. On the other hand, he was also on guard against Primordial Demoness and Einhorn, but these variables were all in Medici's plan. He successfully ambushed Sauron with a trap, making it difficult for Sauron to escape quickly in this field with the power of the cycle of fate. After that, it was time to test his mental strength and willpower. Behind you, Sauron, who had already fallen into a disadvantageous position and was beginning to show signs of being overwhelmed, suddenly changed his expression and shouted at Medici. Hey, there's no need to resort to such petty tricks. After all, it's the King of Angels who embraces uniqueness. Building a realm to conquer the gods is just the basics. You idiot. Sauron cursed, and the spear of destruction he wielded hurtled toward Medici with an aura of annihilation. Hee hee. Seeing Sorin's posture, Medici knew that his earlier shout was just a ruse. If it were truly a trap set by Sauron, Sauron wouldn't have shouted it out to warn him beforehand. If it was something unexpected for Sauron, then Sauron would most likely adopt a conservative defensive stance rather than continue to engage in combat with Sleeve. It's no use. The space here has been sealed off. I can't use the Legion's power, and of course you can't use the power of the other angels in the Sauron family, or Einhorn. In terms of individual strength, how could Sequence 1's Archangel possibly compare to the King of Angels? Medici was in high spirits. Although his spear was also a spear of destruction, unlike Sorin's pure purple spear, Medici's spear burned with a very pale, almost colorless flame. In the most direct battle, Medici directly suppressed Sauron, his fiery red hair flying wildly, truly unrestrained. Bang! Heavy, explosive, savage, like a monstrous steel baboon slamming a fist into Medici's back. Caught off guard, crimson blood seeped from the corner of his mouth, and the spear of destruction in his hand nearly shattered. However, Sauron, who was facing him head-on, showed no mercy and launched a fierce attack. Medici rapidly transformed into flames and strategically shifted his position. Although he was still grazed by the spear of destruction, the damage still tracked back, tearing his iron-black armor. He still managed to spot the attacker from behind. Tutor. Medici practically spat out the name through his teeth. He clearly asked Ouroboros to help guard this area from the outside. Not only did this guy come in, but he also bypassed his senses, causing his perception to be erroneous and delayed. Could it be Jacob? Without giving Medici much time to think, Tutor and Sauron exchanged a glance, and the two Sequence 1 archangels charged forward together, determined to bury Medici here. Outside, Adam and Aemon, looking at their former colleagues, were trapped. Ouroboros, with a complex look in his eyes, wanted to restart his fate, but he was unable to break through the targeted blockade by the two Kings of Angels in a short time. The underground world. Tutor and Sauron are working together to fight against Medici. This is not actually a pre-arranged plan between the two leaders. They just have a tacit understanding. Tutor has made many private meetings with Einhorn and has also dealt with Sauron. They have a tacit understanding, but they did not set up a specific trap in advance, otherwise they would not have been able to trick Medici. Sauron was somewhat surprised by Alistair Tutor's appearance, but since things had come to this point, they should definitely join forces to take down Medici first. Sauron exercised his power of gathering the crowd, and brought Red Priest to power. Sequence 1 and Black Emperor. The power of Sequence 1 was perfectly combined, and by relying on their authority, the two became a kind of King of Angels, which corresponds to Medici. Although their external power was cut off, they could still gather their internal power. Medici's disadvantages are the injuries she sustained from the sneak attack and the cost of locking Sauron in the trap. From Medici's perspective at this time, seeing Tutor appear was actually quite reasonable. After all, Solomon was about to be resurrected, and Tutor and the Black Emperor were destined to turn against each other. Tutor was following the Lord and standing on the Black Emperor's side. Logically and emotionally, there was nothing wrong with Tutor helping Sauron get rid of him. But of course, he wouldn't give up on sowing discord and testing. While trying his best to defend himself, he mocked, "Ha, Sauron, what a clever scheme. You haven't already killed Einhorn, have you? Greater than. Let's die together. Ha, Sauron, what a clever scheme. I hope you haven't already killed Einhorn." Medici's purpose was partly to test Sauron and Tutor. Although he didn't believe Einhorn was dead, otherwise Sauron could have used the Conqueror ability to consume it and aid in digestion through the battle. It didn't stop him from trying to sow discord between the two. Einhorn is ultimately an off-field factor. Are you so sure, Sauron, that after we fight to the death, Einhorn won't come out and take advantage of the situation? You and Tutor have some foundation for cooperation, but isn't Einhorn in the same boat? I didn't have time, after all, I hadn't even laid an ambush on him yet, and you already had. It's the same whether I take you down or deal with Einhorn. I'll enjoy the pleasure of ravaging him then. Sauron didn't hide anything, she simply remained silent, avoided the issue, or implied that Einhorn had been killed, which wouldn't have made much difference. After all, she couldn't extract Einhorn's characteristics, too many details didn't match up, and she couldn't fool the cunning Medici. Sauron was well aware of Medici's attempts to sow discord, and while he was wary of Tutor and Einhorn, he was not easily swayed by Medici's attempts to divide them. This is a fundamental human rights issue. Sauron knew that he and Einhorn were essentially the same in Tutor's eyes. If Tutor truly cooperated with him and lent him power to help him defeat Medici, then there was no need to trick Einhorn and let him reap the rewards of victory. That would be pointless. Tutor has done her a great favor, and Sauron will definitely remember it. Even if she betrays her and helps Einhorn, the favor won't increase, instead, it will only make things awkward for her. If we consider their allegiance in historical context, Sauron and Einhorn are dukes under the White Emperor, while Tudor is now bound to turn against the Black Emperor and lean more towards the White Emperor's side. The three of them have a long-standing foundation of acquaintance and cooperation. Medici, due to fallen god, has always been a staunch supporter of the Black Emperor camp. Admittedly, the threat posed by Einhorn is far less than that posed by Medici. We absolutely cannot let this guy get away with it this time, otherwise he'll learn his lesson and it will be hard for him to have another chance next time. Sauron hardened her heart. When a woman gets ruthless, she really is ruthless. She began to abandon some of her defenses, and her methods became increasingly fierce, giving Medici no time to recover or catch her breath. To be fair, having known each other for many years, Sauron didn't really want to have a bloody confrontation with Einhorn. They were both women who had entered the Red Priest pathway, who also considers themselves women, and having maintained a balance and harmony under Shah-Ur for a long time, still have some mutual respect for each other. Rather than fighting one-on-one to eliminate Einhorn, Sauron wanted to take down Medici, then use the overwhelming advantage of 2+1 King of Angels to give Einhorn a sound beating, then have Hermit arbitrate, and finally arrogantly demote Einhorn to save his life, forcing him to obediently become her angel from then on. Seeing Sauron begin to fight fiercely, Tudor tacitly provided support from the other side, taking on some of Sauron's defensive duties. As for rushing forward and risking injury to help Sauron, he certainly wouldn't do that. On one hand, Sauron needs Medici's characteristics, and Tudor is just an assistant, not someone who can charge forward with his own supplies. On the other hand, most of the power of the sorcerer has been absorbed by Sauron's authority, and the current forces are focused on Sauron, so they don't have the ability to charge forward. He can just play support, since Medici has a hard time getting rid of Sauron in this state. Black Emperor the pathway brings not only a surge in power, but also various restrictive abilities, especially for those in the Red Priest faction. In Sauron's hands at pathway, every step Medici takes can be weakened and restricted. Even if Medici paid a price to rush Tudor, Tudor's power could be directly transmitted through the connection, perhaps along with Sauron's power as well. Medici simply wouldn't be able to instantly kill an experienced archangel. So, Alistair Tudor watched with a sense of guilt as Sauron and Medici fought to the death. Tudor really felt he had let his two sisters down. But that's how the adult world is, and what he chose was a crazy path. He gained support from many sides, which gave him the opportunity to hunt down Medici. Otherwise, even if Sauron and Einhorn had a winner among themselves, they would hardly have had the chance to fight Medici to the death. If this final window of opportunity isn't seized, the Black Emperor will be resurrected and join forces with fallen god once again, making it even less likely that he will have a chance to kill Medici. Hate me if you want. At least we don't have to fight each other. Tudor behaved as usual, showing no emotional fluctuations and calmly observing the battlefield. If he had a choice, he wouldn't want to go to Red Priest either. Pathway, she actually quite likes her identity as a woman. It's all that wretched Truncest's fault. First, he insisted on coming up to Black Emperor. They made things difficult for her on the pathway, then stole her opportunity to transition to the Inquisitor pathway, ultimately forcing her to risk crossing to a non-adjacent pathway, losing her identity as a woman, and harming two of her sisters. You just wait. Truncest. Tudor will remember this grudge, even though Truncest was quite innocent. After all, he was the Black Emperor. Pathway, Inquisitor. Pathway is not part of the Tudor family, but that doesn't stop Tudor from holding grudges. Don't expect Tudor to be reasonable in this kind of matter. Tudor, Truncest. The United Empire proved that two tigers cannot share the same mountain. Even if one is male and the other female, they will inevitably fight sooner or later. Tudor's personality would definitely be competitive, while Truncest's personality is more moderate. If he had given up his Prince of Abolition trait and chosen to marry Tudor, Solomon might not have had a chance to be resurrected. But unfortunately, the Black Emperor did a good job of balancing things out. When the First Solomon Empire still existed, Tudor was assigned to Trier to help the White Emperor handle affairs on the western side of the North Continent, while Truncest was responsible for helping the Black Emperor manage affairs on the eastern side of the North Continent, mainly operating in Backland and its surrounding areas. Solomon never gave the two families a chance to merge from the beginning. Seeing that the battle between Sauron and Medici was becoming increasingly fierce, Tudor couldn't bear it any longer and rushed in to join the close combat. This even moved Sauron, who hadn't expected Tudor to go to such lengths. Whether it was to prevent the investment from going down the drain or to prevent potential retaliation from Medici if they escaped this time, In any case, after this battle, Sauron truly regarded Tudur as one of his own, and their cooperation became increasingly seamless. The interplay of their spirituality and power, and the suppression of each other in combat skills, finally pushed Medici to the brink of destruction. As the War Angel, the Red Angel Medici, even if he had to perish, he would not choose to live a life of dishonor. Let's die together. Greater than a woman among women. Since defeat was inevitable, and Ouroboros had not yet provided support, and the Lord had not yet sent down his power, it meant that they were all being held back. This book is first published on Super Practical, a platform for reading Taiwanese novels, providing you with an error-free and orderly reading experience. During the period before Solomon's return, there was almost no outside help available. Random prayers and chanting the real names of other gods were meaningless and even somewhat ridiculous. Medici was still quite proud at this time and would not call on Leodoro and Acasus, causing these two traitors to launch a sweeping attack. Moreover, prayers would most likely not be transmitted. At the cost of one's life, by aggregating instincts through the Beander characteristic, it's possible to call Cheek over. But Medici would rather let Sauron, who had actually fought a bloody battle, win than let Cheek get away with it for nothing. Cheek had just become a god and then arrogantly killed a descendant, and the subsequent person was also slightly corrupted. Medici hadn't forgotten that grudge. Isn't it just a matter of death anyway? What's there to be afraid of? So many ancient gods have died, so a king of angels isn't that special. Have you had enough? Medici's dim flame suddenly surged, forcing Sauron and Tudur to retreat temporarily. Sauron, if you can survive, you're amazing. I'm completely convinced by your uniqueness and special abilities. Hee, if you die, all your hard work will have benefited Einhorn. Ha ha ha, I want to see if you feel resentful. Medici laughed heartily. He had been tricked by Cheek, and the pollution he had been exposed to was beginning to erode his spirit. But this also made Medici's body, which was on the verge of collapse, more active. After all, he had been injured by Tudor's sneak attack. Now he simply began to burn his sanity, just to fight to his heart's content. Killing one would be enough, and killing two would be a bonus. The expanding, transparent flames with black spots at their core began to burn wildly, even burning Medici's own body. Although the North and South continents do not have a city of calamity, they can still access the Chaos Sea. He spent a long time with fallen god, so how could he not have felt the aura of the Chaos Sea? He used the authority of uniqueness and sacrifice to directly draw power from the Chaos Sea. The pollution he suffered was not important. Even if he was about to die, he would still be polluted. This lunatic. Tudur and Sauron cursed under their breath, but there was nothing they could do. They had to weather Medici's counterattack. The two remained united in their efforts, with Medici's counterattack primarily targeting Sauron. A massive earthquake spread underground, its destructive waves surging and powerful. After forcefully breaking through the blockade, the spear, seemingly forged in Medici's blood, made Sauron feel the threat of death even before it was thrown. This is a qualitative change in the harvest. If this shot hits, then death is real. Except for resurrections like full pathways that rely on historical fog of war to cheat, other ordinary, normal resurrections will basically be exposed directly. Whoosh! Medici should be thrown directly at Sauron. Ideally, he could take down two of them in one shot. If not, he should kill Sauron first, and then finish off Tudur with the next shot. Everything is relative. Even if the spatial blockade is broken, since Medici sacrificed himself to Chaos Sea, it means he cannot draw on the Legion, family members, or other angels he knows, as this would transfer the corruption to them. However, even if it cannot be done to the best of his ability, a king of angels, desperate strike is still dazzling enough. This was almost unstoppable. Just as Sauron was prepared to risk his own life to extinguish Medici's last hope, Tudur stood in front of Sauron. This surprised Sauron. She seemed not to have expected her seemingly fake friend to actually step up in a crucial moment. This wasn't quite Tudor's style. At this moment, Tudur remained relatively calm in the face of what was arguably a fatal attack. Red Priest, a subsidiary of the disaster family. The pathway is a semi-destructive pathway. This kind of overpowered attack is terrible. It can freely switch between hitting a single target and destroying an area. Even if it doesn't hit a weak point, it can still cause considerable destruction. Even if it hits a clone, projection, or substitute, it can still inflict damage on the original body, making the original body feel an inescapable destruction. If it hits a vital point or weakness, it will be an instant kill. Alista Tudur, the epitome of womanhood, calmly took out a crown inlaid with numerous dark gems. This is the Black Emperor, the uniqueness of the pathway. The loot obtained by killing the escaped angel of the Solomon family, due to the uniqueness of fallen god's ability to shepherd uniqueness. Even though the Black Emperor and Fallen God are good allies, the Black Emperor would not entrust uniqueness to Fallen God, which is why Tudor had the opportunity to obtain it. His previous collaboration with Mr. Door, the construction of the mausoleums, and the teleportation doors placed within them were all preliminary preparations. He truly has a chance to break into Sequence 0. The Black Emperor is the reason he was able to win over those proud kings of angels, the Archangels. He truly resented Truncest. This guy's existence slowed down his collection of the Black Emperor. The timing of pathway features and uniqueness, and the fact that it was one step ahead when the transition was needed, blocked the path to Inquisitor pathway. Continue on to Black Emperor pathway. There's not enough time, there's no time to eliminate Truncest before Solomon respawns. Even after transforming into the Inquisitor pathway, it still has to be restrained by that damn Truncest. There wasn't enough time to kill this guy before Solomon resurrected, so it could truly ascend to godhood. Everything is just a matter of time. If Solomon does not rise from the dead, he is confident that he can defeat Truncest, be crowned emperor, and ascend to godhood. Time, however, can only be earned by oneself. Since Red Angel's move has the characteristic that even if it only hits a clone, it can still destroy the main body. So what if Red Angel's desperate attack after sacrificing himself to Chaos C hits the Black Emperor, who is not accepted by anyone? Will uniqueness bring destruction to the Black Emperor who is about to be resurrected? Whether it's completely shattering Solomon's resurrection or slowing it down, Tudor really needs time. He doesn't want to give up his great advantage and embark on a path destined for madness unless absolutely necessary, and he's indifferent to being turned into a man. She was a woman, confident, beautiful, and ambitious. Boom. Red Angel's spear of destruction struck the shining crown. It's hard not to hit Black Emperor uniqueness. After all, there is a Prince of Abolition here with twisted authority, capable of changing the target of an attack. A huge explosion rang out, as if the sky had been split open, and dense hailstones pelted the ground like bullets. In the immediate aftermath of the explosion, Tudor and Sauron retreated in coordination for tactical defense, while Medici, who made no attempt to retreat, was engulfed by the blast. Medici was too exhausted to run, nor did he even consider doing so. Greater than. The stronger, the weaker. Medici, Tudor, and Sauron have all done their best. The result was as expected. Just as the explosion caused no ripples. After the explosion subsided, Tudor and Sauron moved away with their spoils. No one in a higher position came to stop them or try to steal the spoils, since Hermit was still alive. At that time, many people didn't think there was anything wrong with Tudor's actions, nor could they have guessed that Tudor would later go so crazy. Taiwanese novel websites have a large collection of books, you can read them at your leisure. Medici was left in the center of the underground palace like a salted fish that had lost all its strength. His face was covered with scars, but Medici no longer cared about his appearance. He was not only captured but also unconscious. Even if he woke up, he probably wouldn't curse. He had lost, and Medici could afford to lose. Tudor holds the Black Emperor. Uniqueness, this dark crown now has many bloodstains, it looks like it was bombed by Medici. Tudor himself could not make a definitive conclusion, so he chose to leave uniqueness to Hermit. If you want to predict the state of the Black Emperor, Hermit is undoubtedly the best choice. Looking into Alice Tower's resolute yet complex and expectant brown eyes, Shah could only ignore them. He had nothing to say. Was he going to say that many things were already predetermined? Are all your calculations, all your efforts, all your struggles in vain? At this moment, Alistair Tudor was unaware that his greatest enemy was not the Black Emperor. Solomon is not Truncest, not any other high-ranking figure with ambiguous stances, and certainly not some vague concept of fate. He is Hermit standing right before us. Shah held the Black Emperor uniqueness. He also had this feeling, that the greatest enemy was not anyone or any existence, but rather himself. Fate can be fooled, deceived, and switched. He had never held much reverence for fate, but what if he also became a part of fate? How does man lift himself up? How does God rebel against himself? This is a problem. Shah helps Aris Tower become the Black Emperor, and then cultivates another Blood Emperor. Whether it's helping Sauron, Einhorn, or someone else, in the War of the Four Emperors, they can always gather four emperors. Tudor will be satisfied, Truncest will be satisfied, and Sauron, Einhorn, or Medici will also be satisfied. Normal promotion, normal godhood, no conspiracies, no need for gender reassignment, no abstraction or distortion. But no, Shah of the Fifth Epoch knew perfectly well that the War of the Four Emperors was not just a war between four emperors, but also a war between four true god families, the Solomon dynasty, the Tudor dynasty, and the Truncest Empire. He knew about every empire, every royal family, and even their approximate territories. Hermit was more powerful than ever before, but he could not deny himself. His so-called specialness and external advantages make him special and powerful, but they also limit him. It's truly ironic that Hermit of the fourth epoch tied his own hands, while Spectator of the fifth epoch tied himself up. Sha'ur even had a feeling that she had been set up. He didn't want to be a passive observer, but he could only be an observer. The stronger he was, the more he could sense the rules. The initial excitement about multitasking has long since vanished. It's like a double-edged sword, knowing too much in advance is less desirable than letting it grow peacefully in the fourth epoch. That might not be so bad either, all it takes is to wait for an opportunity. Many thoughts surfaced in his mind. Sha'ur knew the outcome without making a prophecy, and after using uniqueness as a medium to make a prophecy, the outcome was as expected. Before the attack hit uniqueness, Medici changed its attack pattern from single target reaping to mass destruction. Solomon was not severely damaged and was able to revive after a period of time. Sha'ur's words made Sorin's expression turn ugly, but Sauron couldn't say anything at this point, since he was the biggest beneficiary of this battle. Tudor remained calm, as if he had expected this all along. Medici did indeed choose to let the water go at the last minute. He did not want to grant Tudor's wish, not because he had any personal grudge against Tudor, but simply for the sake of fallen god, the Medici family, and the Red Legion of War. If Tudor is granted his wish, Tudor and Sauron will likely be promoted to Black Emperor and Red Priest respectively. Although this is still not enough to break the balance of power on the continent, no matter how many factions the North and South continents are divided into at that time, fallen god will have nothing to do with it, and Little Red will definitely have to consider the priest. Actually, it's not that there's no chance. The best way for me to be promoted to Red Priest is to fight another war, as that would make the Ascension ritual even more effective. Since war is inevitable anyway, if I can advance first, then after killing Truncest, you'll still have a chance to switch to the Inquisitor pathway. Sauron spoke up first. He values relationships. Tudor went to great lengths to help him this time, and he will surely repay Tudor after he becomes a god. Although if there is a general ascension, the members of the six gods will definitely cooperate to protect Truncest and abandon Tudor, so the chances of actually killing Truncest are slim, but who can say for sure what will happen in the future? Anyway, they have more people and more gods on their side, so even if Solomon returns, he won't be able to settle scores with the Tudor family. Yes, it's all up to human effort. Tudor nodded, seemingly agreeing with Sorin's point of view. His expression remained tense, which Sauron could understand. After all, even if one could understand many things, it was certain that one would feel uncomfortable. He did not continue to mention the relevant matters to affect Tudor's mood, but instead turned and walked towards Medici, who was lying dead on the ground. Get promoted to Red Priest as soon as possible, repay the favor sooner, and avoid any further unforeseen events. Sorin's simplest move was to extinguish Medici's life force. As Sequence 1, it didn't require destroying the corpse or waiting for traits to be extracted, the authority of conquest acted upon Medici's body. Red Priest, the uniqueness and Sequence 1 properties emerged like pillars of fire. The Conqueror trait doesn't need any extra digestion. Once I've absorbed the uniqueness, Einhorn will have no choice but to give up. There's no need or point in stubbornly resisting and delaying things. Sauron was quite confident about what choice Einhorn would make. After all, he was one of their own. He was even looking forward to the scene of Einhorn bowing down to him. PFF'd. Sharp claws pierced Sorin's heart from behind. The claws were ablaze with purple flames, which complemented the uniqueness and Conqueror properties emanating from them. Sauron recognized Einhorn's aura almost instantly, and a surge of immense emotion welled up within him. However, before these negative emotions could truly take hold, these thoughts, feelings, and ideas vanished along with his life. Tudor, what if? Holy crap. Sauron fell. It was almost an instant kill. Red Priest, that's the power of Pathway. If it hits the vital point, it's an instant harvest. Even hitting a clone can affect the main body, otherwise, the Go family wouldn't be so obedient in front of Red Priest. Aren't you going to stop me? Tudor withdrew the black hand that had pierced Sorin's chest, supported Sorin's corpse, and turned to Sha'ur with a puzzled look. I foresaw this. Prophecies in normal circumstances can be interpreted differently and may lead to two different paths. The price of stopping you may be even heavier. What could Sha'ur do? He was even somewhat relieved that Fifth Epoch hadn't rushed to ascend to the spirit world and reclaim the Holy Throne as Orange Light had suggested. That might have meant becoming invincible, or it might have meant being shackled with an even heavier burden. Who could say for sure? The price you'd pay for sacrificing two of us is the annihilation of us all. After Sauron became a god, did he really start a great war and drag several gods into it? Tudor could only think of this one possibility for a short time, but he didn't care much about it now. Instead, he looked at Shah and asked, "So, shall we? Let me experience what it's like to be a woman one last time." Not interested. Shah shook his head, took out a bell, and collected Soren's remaining spirituality and spirit. He still had the authority over the end, so whether a transcendent dies and returns to the underworld or to him was up to him. Sauron probably never imagined that Tudor would betray him right under Shah's nose. Shah has absolutely no interest in doing anything risky. Other time travelers must have it much easier than him, they're definitely more grounded. Shah felt he had lost the joy of striving and could only watch others struggle. The trier is yours. With a wave of your arm, half of the North Continent will submit to you. Now that things have come to this point, Shah naturally transferred the political legacy left by the White Emperor to Tudor. Can this be considered a victory? Tudor, with a smile, asked, "I've combined uniqueness, 3 sequence 1 traits, into a crimson potion burning with flames. Anyway, it was a failure for me." Shah admitted his defeat. After all, no matter what, Medici was only sold once, but he had to sell Sauron twice. Although the second time didn't really count and Sauron wouldn't fall again, it still felt like a rather unpleasant experience. "Then I'll consider myself the winner." Tudor nodded. "Red Priest it is. Gender doesn't really matter, or rather, it can be selectively discarded. I've always been curious about something." Shah regained his composure and spoke in a somewhat subtle tone. Tudor paused in his action of taking drugs, tilted his head to look at Shah and casually smiled. "I used to like Solomon, but after he fell, I started liking you because back then, I thought I could become the Black Emperor." Tudor was quite frank this time. He knew that Shah didn't want to ask this, but that didn't stop him from answering. After all, once he drank the potion, he wouldn't have a chance to say it, and it would be a bit unreasonable to ask him to say it now. Besides, there's nothing to be ashamed of. Tudor's liking is simple, or rather, straightforward. Shah nodded, not paying much attention, but thinking more seriously, even saying as she pondered, "You said, the Red Priest has male authority, and the Primordial Demoness has female authority, which certainly results in a forced gender reversal, but if Red Priest connects himself with the Primordial Demoness through the authority of war, then Red Priest and Demoness can share and exchange authority. If male and female authority are exchanged, will the corresponding genders also change?" Shah thought it was very possible, but also felt it was suicidal. This universe is both the least respectful of gender and the most respectful of gender. If things go wrong, the underlying logic might ignite, and the two true gods would go crazy for such a ridiculous reason, which would be quite abstract. Tudor was taken aback. He never expected Shah to ask such a question. In his eyes, when the decision was made to switch pathways, Primordial Demoness Cheek is already a mortal enemy, yet Shah actually raised this question. Gender isn't really important. Tudor's pragmatism is just that he doesn't like to change, but he doesn't care if it's better if he does. In his opinion, Cheek, who has been a demoness for half his life, certainly wouldn't care about such a trivial matter as gender. But Shah's words reminded Tudor of something. Tudor had seen the second blasphemy slate. Adam showed it to him, and it was sponsored by Red Priest. Pathway Potion Recipe. Sequence 0 Red Priest's authority to war not only allows the sharing of power, but also of status and uniqueness. Although only one person in the team can use uniqueness at a time, what if Red Priest and Primordial Demoness share it? Ordinary team members, even if they share uniqueness and rank, cannot unleash their full power without their own foundation. But Red Priest and Demoness, as adjacent paths, are different. They are adjacent paths, so even if they exchange uniqueness, they can still unleash their power perfectly. In fact, because they have a bit of the old god's aura, they will be even stronger. In that instant, Tudor's gaze towards Shah changed, and he thought to himself, this guy truly lives up to Hermit's name. What are you thinking? I was just wondering if Red Priest's war authority is lacking in functionality. If we add Fool Pathway, Path of Error, and Door Pathway authorities to the team, could Red Priest and Primordial Demoness directly swap their Beander characteristics? It's not about sharing, but about exchanging pathways directly all at once. True adjacent path swapping. The more Shah talked, the more terrifyingly powerful the Tudor dynasty seemed. Who says the Tudor dynasty was the weakest of the 4 empires? The weakest was clearly the southern barbarian Death, who couldn't even penetrate the North Continent. Tudor's crew includes Mr. Dor, Aemon, and Banu, Jacob, and Tamara, the 3 great families of mystery. I've collected all the uniqueness items, all 3 sequence 1 items from Dor, and both sequence 1 items from Error and Fool, plus a Tamara item and an Inquisitor pathway item. Sequence 2 is called Balancer. Tudor brought the Tamara family into the original timeline and treated them like dukes, allowing them to sit at the same table as other dukes. This truly has its value. Isn't the Balancer's authority precisely about sensing the imbalance of power and appearing as a coordinator and assistant? If the Blood Emperor weren't of insufficient rank to withstand the combined power of the three great families of Mystery's uniqueness, the dukes below might not have fully cooperated. That would have made him practically invincible. Even without optimization, Blood Emperor, Tudor dynasty, is unlikely to be destroyed, at least not in the fourth epic. Even though Mr. Dor was banished during the War of the Four Emperors, it was only because the Blood Emperor's subsequent exit was somewhat unexpected. Otherwise, with the team sharing a connection, such as the Evernight Goddess and the Lord of Storms, how could they possibly contain Mr. Dor? Greater than Red Priest, Justiciar, Black Emperor. Tudor was somewhat impressed by Shah-Ur's imagination, especially since it seemed that he not only dared to think about it, but actually wanted to try it out. He seemed to really want to experience the feeling of directly replacing the pathway in his body, which was truly a bit crazy. I am not your guinea pig. Don't even think about using me for anything. Shah-Ur's sudden remark made Tudor's eyes turn dangerous. This had to be made clear beforehand. Of course, she could accept being used. She, Adam, and Aemon also used each other, but using each other and conducting experiments were two different things. The latter was somewhat disrespectful. You're overthinking it. We're not that close. Shah-Ur thought Tudor was dreaming. If he really wanted to play, it would be his own game, and Tudor wouldn't have a say in it. I think I don't need to avoid this anymore, right? He watched as Tudor, in front of a silver mirror, cut out a deep projection of the United Empire in the mirror world as supplementary material, and asked casually. There's no need for that, I've already felt it. Tudor shook her head. The Prince of Abolition properties within her were making her increasingly restless. Even without Hermit's help, she knew that the Black Emperor would return soon. While timing her advancement perfectly, getting it before the Black Emperor's return, drinking the potion, maintaining her condition, and letting the sequence 1 trait within her disappear to slow her madness, is still a risky move. If she can kill Einhorn and Sauron, is there no one who can kill her? Shah-Ur also wanted to encourage Tudor. If it weren't for the need for a Black Emperor, he could have easily teamed up with Antigonus to trap the Prince of Abolition trait within Tudor. Since he was destined to go crazy anyway, he might as well let him go crazy a little longer. Tudor will only suffer for 3 to 5 years at most, experiencing headaches throughout spring, summer, autumn, and winter. After Solomon's resurrection, it will lack the Sequence 1 feature and will be unable to regain its divine status. Shah-Ur thought this deal was a bargain. Who said that the true God couldn't stop the order rules of the Black Emperor's aggregation characteristics? There are no absolutes in this world. It's not impossible to suppress the true characteristics and let the Black Emperor aggregate the false characteristics. Tudor was initially feeling somewhat melancholic, but after being distracted by Shah-Ur, she no longer cared about anything. She drank the potion in her hand, and with the addition of auxiliary ingredients, the potion became the complete version. Tudor's heart felt like it was burning with a raging fire. No, it really was burning with flames. Shah-Ur's gaze passed through the flames, watching the wavy hair transform into a muscular physique. She still felt that this gender-linked career path was very unfriendly, and unlike men who had a gender advantage on the demoness pathway, women on the hunter pathway didn't have much of an advantage. The barriers of the Western continent remain, and the initial protections of transgender advancement, along with the advantages of Primordial One's backhand, cannot be fully utilized. He reached out and simply stole the negative energy that was rapidly transforming and disappearing within Tudor's body. With less interference from the negative energy, Tudor's ascension became easier. In the real world, a rebellion that began with Trier also unfolded, and the entire United Empire was once again plunged into a low-intensity war. Red Priest seems to need to do nothing. His birth itself is the beginning of disaster, the source of turmoil, and the start of conflict. With the support of several gods, Truncest, who had originally planned to play it safe, could no longer sit still. Even if it played it safe, Tudor's condition might not be good, and he might not be able to directly attack Dor and sacrifice his head as a sacrifice, but Truncest dared not gamble. Let's give it our all. Truncest began forcibly aggregating the Inquisitor pathways 3+1. Shah-Ur sensed it for a moment, but couldn't figure out how Truncest had so abstractly concocted a divine ritual. I used to think that with the help of the 6 gods, the Night Emperor judged the demon monarch, and Farbati was quite happy to be sealed away, which would also reduce the harassment from the Mother Tree of Desire. But now that idea has long been overturned. The Earth barrier in the 4th epic is still relatively stable, and Farbati, that otaku, has no intention of coming out of Abyss. Now, it might be a divine kingdom, or it might be an item with some uniqueness, who knows. Shah had no time to care about the situation in Truncest, because the resurrection of the Black Emperor had been brought forward with the successive attempts of his two dukes to ascend to godhood. The Tudor, Truncest Empire, even if it existed in name only, had not yet had time to take over. The birth of the two emperors, East and West, seemed to correspond perfectly to the glorious period of the First Solomon Empire, when the Black and White Emperors ruled together. The power of order, like invisible threads, entangles within the astral world, awakening the long-fallen king at this moment. Your emperor has returned to his earthly kingdom. This was as if it were a declaration that resounded directly from the heart. Even though the Solomon Empire had long since perished, the United Empire, which inherited the laws of the Solomon Empire, still allowed this emperor on the side of order to borrow some power. This pronouncement finally rang in the ears of every living being in the North Continent. Shah ignored the sounds around him, calmly looking at the Black Emperor in his hand. Uniqueness has disappeared. This feeling isn't pleasant, no one has ever been able to take anything away from him. It's a pity that it's already a dual pathway god, otherwise it would be great to try to devour Solomon and steal the resurrection ritual. Shah held a dark red gem in her hand, thinking this. In Astral World, the Black Emperor is incorporated. Solomon's face darkened as uniqueness reappeared, a piece of uniqueness's authority was missing. He knew without even thinking who did it, only Hermit had the ability and the leisure to do it. Even Aemon wouldn't do such a despicable thing. Despite his anger, Solomon began to merge the three Sequence 1 traits, first reassembling into a god, and then settling scores with Hermit later if the opportunity arose. Solomon's return to godhood was virtually unstoppable by any god. Even the slightest danger would be nipped in the bud by the ever-watchful fallen god. Here in Tudor, some of the negative aspects of his body have been stolen, posing the greatest hidden danger as a non-adjacent pathway. Black Emperor pathway. The characteristics of Sequence 1 have also been aggregated by Solomon, so his ascension to godhood is now stable. Truncest is in a slightly better position. Although he was a step behind and his abilities were extracted faster, Black Emperor and Justiciar are on adjacent paths, so his original set of abilities can serve as support and are not a burden. In the fourth epoch, an era where ancient customs still existed, there was virtually no failure in ascending to godhood. Black Emperor, Red Priest, and Justiciar, while not born at the same time, were not born much apart. Greater than. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.